All right. Looks like we're live. It says live. Now we're live? Okay. Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good middle of the night, wherever you are. Another version, another session of Yogi to Yogi. So we'll go with questions that were sent in, and then we can extrapolate on those as needed. As you can write in the chat box, and also we can take some new questions if I get through these pages. Let's see how we go, okay? If you're new to Yogi, this is a session where I try to give helpful instructions for people on the path, if it's something I know about, because one of the things that we really lack today are experienced guides on the path. Everybody's a teacher, but nobody has experience. Nobody's gone through a few decades of training and so forth. And we need more experienced guides, people who've actually done something for 10, 15, 20 years, a practice, a path, and so on, have achieved the fruition of that path. We need that kind of guidance. And this is hopefully what we can help people with, okay? So here we go. First question from Brian, I'll read them. In your level 1 Kundalini Hatha Yoga online videos, you explain a progressive sequence of practices to be followed for 3 to 6 months, leading to in-person training for levels 2 to 5. So we do the ones on the video first, and then you come for training live. Trika mahasiddha yoga is very much about live in-person training, right? You're never going to get really deep training online. Just won't happen. You also mentioned that the level 1 practices can be supportive for those not intending to pursue level 2 plus of Kundalini Hatha Yoga, who intend to take another path, such as way of water. So we talk about how these are supportive and foundational for other paths as well. Which way do you want to go?
Just to let you more space, because when you put your hands on that, it shakes the...
Okay. And so the Kundalini Hatha Yoga level 1 that we put out is foundational for other paths where you're not going to focus on Kundalini Yoga, but it will help with your channel system, which is important to help with your mind and your energy. This is the key. Even though it's basic, it will help a lot. All right. So then Brian says, in this case, are these level 1 practices used the same way? For example, follow the practice routine for 3 to 6 months, then stop and move on to the other path as the next step. Okay. So what you're learning in the level 1 can be something that you do without doing level 2 or 3 or 4, and you can take it into way of water or way of meditation. Excuse me. No, thanks. It's the neti, back dripping neti. So you can use this as a foundation for those and continue to use it, but then it has to become prescriptive. This is the important part. So after the first 3 to 6 months of practice, then if everything's kind of balanced, as you go down the other ways, you want to use it when you feel like you need it and take sections out that you feel like you need. My Agni is low, so I'm going to do the ones that build my Agni. I'm a bit stiff. My earth and water elements are getting a bit high. I'm feeling kind of stiff and stodgy and heavy. I'm going to do more of the dynamic movement ones with breath. Third series, right? Water series. Like this. You want to use it more prescriptively than just following the same routine every single day. Okay. But yes, you can continue it into those other paths. Now, if you're doing way of fire, then all this is explained in very clear, and you'll understand it much better. Way of fire, though, after level 1, you got to do in person. So is there a recommended time interval between completing Kundalini Hatha Yoga level 1 practice routine and starting the next step? Whether that is Kundalini Hatha Yoga level 2 or something else. Okay. The time gap between starting level 1 and level 2, if you're at home and you're new to yoga and you're not applying it in an intensive fashion like we're doing here in the trainings, yeah? If you're at home and what was I talking about? Yeah, but what was I saying? Oh, yeah. So if you're at home and you're applying this level 1 practice, this intro practice, and you're not in an intensive kind of mode, then it's good to do, I think, for somewhere between 6 to 12 months continuously before you go to level 2, somewhere like that. If you're very experienced at yoga and you're not really vata deranged, your wind isn't too messed up in your channels, you could probably do it for 3 months, have everything harmonized a little bit more, get a better feeling for the system, and then dive into level 2. If you're using one of the other 4 ways, way of water, way of meditation like this, then you can just go straight into the other way. There doesn't need to be any gap between finishing level 1 and starting the other ways. Brian goes on, you also mentioned that doing the same postures day after day can lead to prana disease. I've been doing Yogi Bhajan style Kundalini yoga daily, which includes some of the same postures, such as cat-cow. Yeah, it's not really cat-cow, it's Majariyasana for everybody out there who wants to get into the Sanskrit of the yoga. Never don't understand how they got cow out of that. But anyway, these are recommended for daily practice in that system. I now worry that I may be setting myself up for prana disease in the future. Can you go into a little more detail on what causes prana disease and the symptoms? All right. This is a good question to understand. And Yogi Bhajan's yoga is definitely imbalanced. What everybody practices called Kundalini yoga around the world. You're going to get a vata derangement unless you are the most solid 500 pounds of world's strongest man kind of body person. You can't do that every day. And you'll notice like a lot of the teachers who are very good at it and very grounded are really big kapha people. That's what I've noticed. Everybody else starts spinning out and going off like spinning because the wind that's created in that system is way too much. What am I getting at here? There are 2 types of yoga, or 2 ways to apply traditional yoga. You can't apply Iyengar like this. You can't apply Bikrams like this. You cannot apply Ashtanga like this. They are not spiritual systems of yoga, period. You cannot apply fluffy, warm yoga flow that you learn in the corner of your studio, corner studio on your block. It's not, none of that commercial stuff can be applied this way. But if you're going to do traditional yoga with a Tibetan teacher teaching, or someone teaching Tibetan yoga, or someone teaching Kundalini Hatha yoga from India, then this is important to understand. There are 2 ways to apply it. One is called prescriptive, and the other, I don't know if we can call it, but it's like siddhi for attainment. Now, in the attainment yoga, you do the progressive practices and you drill them until you get tremendous attainment, right? Like Mahakumbhaka that we're starting in October this year. People are going to come and do a progressive all year long training, all year long, leading up to some very high results, hopefully by the end of the year, if people are diligent in their practice and have good capacity and health, etc. That's a siddhi attainment. That's where you say, okay, I'm progressively going for something of a higher and higher attainment. You can look at the Ashtanga system of Patabi Joyce in this way, but it's purely physical attainment because you're going through series 1 to series 6. I think that's all there is, 6, right? And then you're just getting physically more like a Gumby, basically. But when I'm talking about siddhi attainment in Kundalini Hatha yoga or Tibetan yoga, you go progressively through on a path that's set out in that yoga, step by step by step, to reach the fruit of it. Once you reach the fruit of it, everything changes. But that's one way to practice your yoga. Okay. The other way is prescriptive, where you, in conversation with your teacher, if you're not very good with Ayurveda, or you're new to Ayurveda, you're new to yoga and so on, you in conversation with your teacher, develop a program that is like getting a prescription from the doctor for medicine. And this is really, for spiritual practitioners, this is 90 to 99% of how Kundalini Hatha yoga or Tibetan yoga is applied in the life of a spiritual practitioner, whether a way of fire or a way of water, way of meditation, doesn't matter, right? Because if we are producing the same movements over and over again, we're going to develop a groove. It's never good to have a groove, a groove, especially when we're talking about practices, especially like Kundalini, Yogi Bhajan's Kundalini yoga was mentioned, where you're really huffing and puffing a lot. You're really pushing your breath, really trying to get purified with the breath. And this also is relevant to mention that at this moment, that when Yogi Bhajan first started teaching, whether he's really a teacher or not, whether he made all this up or not, he was dealing with a lot of drug addicts from the streets of LA and later Arizona. And he thought they need to be purified, purified, purified. So he started making up more of this pranayama stuff in his yoga and, blah, blah, blah. And you see, so he was trying to purify everybody. But problem was people never got to the other levels of yoga where you go for stability, where you don't huff and puff constantly, where you hold your breath for minutes at a time, where you go for still meditations as part of the Kundalini Hatha Yoga path. So that's why it's really imbalancing, because same movements with the same harsh breath patterns over and over again condition your prana system into what we call prana disease. And prana disease is very difficult to self-diagnose because often it affects the mind. A person can become a bit strange, a bit antisocial, a bit awkward, a bit delusional, or a lot awkward, a lot strange, a lot delusional. It can be a lot if persons are really whacked out in their practice. And this is all because Kundalini Hatha Yoga is from the guru-disciple tradition. It comes within a beautiful context of the larger view teachings, larger methodologies, systems of astrology, systems of healthcare, and it comes down in a full package. And then the student studying with a guru who has this kind of system, like we have in Trika mahasiddha yoga, to be quite honest, knows how to place their yoga. But it's not like that out there in the world today. People are doing stuff repetitively forever. In a very gross example of prana disease, let me give you a gross example of this. The Ashtanga people get a lot of injuries. And I used to treat them all the time in my clinic before I knew what Ashtanga was. When I left, training in India and I went back to Australia and I was opening, my clinic, and I had patients coming in. There were patients coming in with tons of elbow and shoulder injuries and knee injuries, and especially elbow and shoulder and wrist, I remember. And they say they're doing yoga, and I thought they were doing yoga like I was doing yoga. And it turns out through the repetitive, constant use of the same postures, it becomes imbalanced. The body becomes imbalanced. You can think of it like if I'm a bodybuilder person and I only do like the bicep curls to make my arms really big, and that's all I do every day, I'm going to end up with big lumpy biceps and the rest of me looks like a twig or something, a pencil. And then that creates an imbalance in my physiology, right? Okay. So it's the same. That's a gross level of prana disease. On a subtle level, though, when you're huffing and puffing and holding certain postures or doing certain movements over and over and over, you're training your prana in the channels to move in a certain way. You won't have a negative effect on your mind right away. In prana disease, it takes a very long time for the negative effect to finally accumulate, but eventually it will accumulate. Now it's become a hardened pattern in the channels which run your biochemistry, which run your physiology, which run your thought patterns, your emotions, your perceptual field, etc. All those things I just named get skewed because of the patterning, the imbalanced patterning of the prana in the channels through repetitive blah, 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 without the practice being prescriptive, without it being progressive, right? Outside the understanding of the context of the whole systems of yoga that were brought to us by the Kundalini Hatha Yoga masters. So the symptoms can range really greatly. I think Brian asked, let me see. I worry that I may have set myself for prana disease in the future. Can you go into a little more detail on what causes prana disease and the symptoms? So symptoms can be anything, but the scary part is that at a very deep level, it's going to affect pretty much 3 or 4 systems mainly. It's going to affect your nervous system. You're going to end up with nervous system problems when you get older. That's not good. Things like Parkinson's, that's a nervous system hormonal problem. Things like just shaking, becoming debilitated and weak too soon, before your age, early aging, this kind of stuff. Dementia should scare us enough not to do it, right? But one of the two systems also that are affected a lot by prana disease kind of quickly, or not quickly because it takes a while to accumulate these effects, but are the heart and the lungs. So we can see heart-lung problems developing where they're not working in synchrony very well. And that's a problem. That can create long-term problems, right? Also, the mind, just directly in the mind now. Let's talk about it. You may not show a lot of symptoms in the body, but the mind is the average person's thinking mind is just a discursive mind, which is a product of the prana in the channels, actually. A little bit of chakra influence and prana in the channels. So all the mind coming out all day long through our speech and our perceptions and our thinking and our emotions. It's all a manifestation of what is the stability of our channels? What is the strength of them? What level have we increased the function of chakra into higher level function? Or to what degree have we shut them down and so forth? So when we start getting prana disease like this, then oftentimes one of the first things we'll see are mental emotional imbalances. But the person usually doesn't notice. That's why I'm saying it's hard to detect. Friends, family, may notice. But then if you're embedded in a group of people who do the same prana disturbing practices, they're never going to notice either. It becomes how we are, our lifestyle, right? You're ungrounded. You're very spaced out. God realmy. Couldn't go the other way. Can go hell realmy and get you all paranoid too. It can go the other way. But oftentimes it's very spaced out, ungrounded, inability to engage usefully, meaningfully with the regular people of the planet, and you start to try to think like you're special and stay away. You have special needs and you got to stay away from everybody and live in the high mountain monastery or whatever. But I see a lot of this basically. And I saw a lot of it as a healthcare practitioner too. And it was kind of sad because these people were self-identifying as evolving spiritually, as being super healthy, getting really weird about nutrition, the super vegan, raw, less food. I'm a breatharian, this kind of stuff. We see a lot of this and it's kind of sad to see. Also, just not being able to relate to people on a regular basis, like just normal, friendly, hey, how's it going? What's up? Yeah, you get weird. Like they'll sit back and be in their awareness and just watching everything, or always have to say something that sounds like some maxim or aphorism that you'd read in a book on aphorisms or something, positive thinking. It gets too much. People don't notice this in themselves because the change is very gradual. Often, like I said, they don't notice it in their peer group because they often attract peers who are just as whacked, often just doing the same kind of practices, right? That's why it's really important to engage in the world. This is one of the reasons I think it's very important to engage in the world in the first stages of like practice of 1 to 5, stages 1 to 5 out of the 12-stage view map, because you have to stay integrated and engaged. You've got to be able to know when you're losing it a little bit, All right. So keep it prescriptive or keep it a progressive practice like we talk about in the programs that we give here, and you'll be safe. Anuk, I read an explanation of Trika as representing the inactive, active, and non-active energy, as it was discussed about effort and effortlessness, I guess you mean, in the group lately. Could you elaborate in that light, this representation of Trika? I cannot, my friend, I cannot, because it's not our understanding of Trika. It's not how we define Trika. It's not what we use. We don't have this type of idea in our view teachings that there's inactive energy, active energy, and non-active energy. No idea what they mean. So if you want to write in a question for clarifying it or something, feel free. Okay. So I can't help you there. Oksana, thank you for class about Shiva Sutras and for all the commentaries and explanations. Without them, it would be very difficult to understand the real meaning of those shlokas. You spoke about the absolute manifesting into evil, the absolute manifesting into evil, like murderers, torturers, dictators, etc., or just mean parents. No. Some tantric teachers explain these evil manifestations from 3 gunas point of view, that all those people have a very tamasic nature, which makes them behave that way. But once they realize it, they can evolve from tamas. If you don't know these terms, tamas is like the heavy-duty, self-absorbed, lower consciousness kind of energy, through rajas, which is the movement energy, and the energy of movement, but it could be movement for good or bad, actually. But it's movement about change and movement, not so stagnant like tamas and sattva, which is pure, supposedly pure. So a balance of stagnation and movement and doing that for the benefit of all beings, that's sattva. Oh, so let me read that again. Once they realize it, they can evolve from tamas through rajas into sattva and even become saints. What is TMY's view in this explanation? Is the term evolution applicable to the path of self-realization? All right. Absolute manifesting into this world comes as nirvana and samsara, comes as the beauty and the ugly. That's just the way it comes in. And it's both the absolute. That's all there is to it. In one case, there's a movement in the beauty case, in the positive, the merit, the case of people who are doing good, trying to be good, trying to love all beings and help, etc., and evolve themselves or grow spiritually. The energy is moving, or the energy of awareness or energy awareness is moving back towards its own nature. In those people, it's moving towards its own nature. So I don't use tamas, rajas, sattva. A lot of this terminology is just so non-useful, honestly, that we don't even bother with it anymore. And to learn it all is kind of like, to learn it all and then try to apply it and make it fit to real life yoga, real life spiritual work from our oral practice tradition. It's just totally unnecessary. So let me try to give you this understanding of it. There are people, yes, when absolute manifests through human consciousness in this world as different people, we're born with different proclivities. We have different karmas. Some of us are having, all of us have problems. There's no question, or we wouldn't be here in a body, right? That's it. We'd be in a different plane where we don't have bodies that have to live, have pain, and die, in a nutshell. So yeah, we're here and we have problems and we have to work out those problems. Where do they exist? What areas of our psychology? What areas are we conditioned really deeply in, and so on. And that's up to us to figure out and up to us to work with and change. That's the spiritual path. When you're doing that, you're manifesting, going towards the absolute, right? Back towards your own nature. When you're not, you're moving away from it. You're going towards more darkness, more limitation, more pain and suffering. It's quite simple. Yeah, so that's it. And is the term evolution applicable to the path of self-realization? We don't prefer evolution as much as we prefer adaptation. Adaptation, which is really what evolution is supposed to be. The idea that we're evolving, when we use the word evolution and evolving, there's an idea that all of us individually and all of us universally, all beings are evolving towards some great heaven-like manifestation of experience. That everybody is, coming in at a lower level and going to move up, and eventually all beings will be operating at this very high level of spirituality, very high level of enlightenment. That's what evolution's about, right? Evolving into something better and better and better. So it's this idea about better and better. And that's not really what's going on at all. Human beings, it's not taught in the teachings anywhere that we evolve, that we're eventually going to become this great super being and no more suffering. That eventually we'll all get it. Was there some words for this in the New Age? New Age is really big on this. I don't know where they got it from, but they just ride with this like crazy. We're entering the age of Aquarius. They started with the hippies with the age of Aquarius. But you got all the other ages that come after that, which aren't evolved, right? And there's all this kind of thing. So it's better to understand that there's cycles in this dimension of form and desire. There are cycles. This dimension will always be form and desire. This dimension will always be a place of pain and suffering, as well as liberation, as well as the way out of pain and suffering. But to think that we're all evolving individually or en masse, is not in our teachings, right? We're adapting. We're realizing our situation as it is. And then we're changing what is the most important thing to change, which is our own awareness. That's what needs to change. Our own energy, our own awareness, right? We're not evolving in the sense of going towards some final zenith point where it's awesome. Okay. That isn't really how it happens. It's a super linear, dualistic way of thinking. Unfortunately, some people from India were influenced heavily by certain messianic messages, Christian kind of messages about the final rapture and everybody, the whole universe tilts and everybody's in heaven forever. We finally made it. There's enough of us that are conscious. 100th monkey. So we're waking everybody up and bringing us with them. And that's an infiltration of non-Dharma ideas into the Dharma. What's his name? Aurobindo. He was very big on it too. He was very big on getting this place. Yogananda even wrote something in his book about, at some point in the universe, all beings will be good and this whole universe will cease to exist. They're great people. I don't want to talk bad about them, talk smack about them, but this is not in the Dharma teachings, and I don't believe it's going to happen because it's never happened. It's a one-off idea. Maybe they were just trying to be inspirational. I know that Aurobindo kind of made a thing out of it, but we're not really evolving. So the sooner we get rid of the idea of evolving, because that just puts us out of our center. Oh, I'm going to go to that place where I'm really together now. Oh, we'll all be there and all this pain and suffering will be gone. Oh, I don't want to deal with another video of all the pain and suffering I see out there in the world. Oh, it's hurting my soul, my heart. I'm traumatized. It's microaggression. And I want to go to a place where it's all love and light and everybody, accepts me completely for who I am. That ain't going to happen. It just isn't going to happen, even when you leave this plane. So it's better that we understand adaptation. We learn to grow and be with what is. And just like our immune system, your immune system functions from birth. You get some from your mom. But it only functions, it only comes into being, and it's an amazing system by what? Contacting all the evil in the world that's trying to kill you. The viruses, the bacteria, the mold, the fungi, yeast, you name it. Everything out there trying to get you. Your immune system, parasites, it has to contact that. It has to make contact with that for you to thrive. You have to go through that pain. You have to go through that reaction. You have to risk your life in a way in order to have a life. It's very different than the evolution idea, okay? And you got some more in here. Let's keep going. If I understood it right, Matrika, now back to the Shiva Sutra references. Matrika is a form of energy that directs individual beings out of their true nature and also directs them back to their self-realization. Yeah, Matrika is just the word that they use for the fact that there's only two places to go. Back to your self-nature or further into delusion and suffering, right? So they just use the word matrika as a description of the energy of it. And it comes from, the roots are to measure, meter, matra has mother in it, has meter in it, to measure. And that means manifested reality, that's all. So the energy of manifestation comes in two ways, spiritually, we'd say from a Shiva Sutra Shaiva standpoint, mahasiddha yoga standpoint. It comes in and continues to contract and create suffering for itself on this form desire plane for more and more lifetimes until you finally get it. Or you change into a demon realm being or a ghost realm being and you leave the opportunity of evolving in this plane, Or you don't. You go the way of the Dharma and you open and you change and you grow and so on, right? This is also Matrika. So basically you say, the same energy, Matrika creates knowledge that is bondage and knowledge that can free from that bondage. That is correct. That is called Matrika. But here's the thing I want to discuss. This is yogi to yogi stuff here for sure. When we say, oh, Rajas Tamas Sattva, Matrika, and we get all this new vocabulary. If you're not getting what it means on a very grounded, basic understanding, like Matrika, okay, it's cool because now it's referring to the phonemes of the Sanskrit alphabet and it gets very complex and rich and it's this amazing view. But you got to remember, it's about the moon, not the finger pointing to the moon. And when we learn a new word like Matrika, we got to remember that it just means that everything shows up here in two forms. Moving towards essence, moving away from essence. And even in those forms, we can go back and forth. Sometimes we're moving towards it. Sometimes we're moving away from it. So what I love about the mahasiddha tradition, which I'm going to explicate today a lot more because I think Donald's questions are in here, are they not? Donald's questions are in here today. I'm going to explain a lot more about mahasiddha tradition because people don't quite understand it, is that one of the key points of mahasiddha tradition is that it's super pragmatic. It's super practical. It's super rational to the point that people can miss it as profound and just think it's simple instead of understanding that simplicity can be very profound. So one of the things we need to do, especially as people who do human realm a lot, when we receive these new words in the Shiva Sutras or in Tibetan sutras, you have to be very careful not to think that word is something new, that's representing something you've never heard of before. Maybe it is, but most times it's not. Like I'm saying that your experience has shown you contract and you expand. That's it. That's Matrika. And there's other elaborate Sanskrit terms for it that Abhinavagupta and company came up with, and it's beautiful. I love it. It's beautiful. Is it necessary to grow? No. Is it important to understand all of it? On a practical level, yes. I can expand or I can contract. Only two choices. There's no such thing as staying idle. That's it. Idle is actually contraction. So I don't need to know anything else. So when you see Matrika, just remember that. And when you hear about all the phonemes, all the all the Sanskrit that relates to it. Just remember, these are just ways of further dividing what you already know to be really pragmatically two categories, expansion or contraction. No big deal. You don't have to get all involved about it. People love it. And they go into the mantras and they break it down. I saw a post on this recently on Kavita's site. Someone put in this thing about breaking down the mantra into every little sound and how it comes together. And it's beautiful. I love it. I learned all that. I love it. In the end, it's really important. And that gets you more into it, which is good. It gets you more inspired and more into it when you know that knowledge. It can help like that. But in the end, you just got to do it, man. You just have to be like the Nike slogan, just do it. You've got to be able to make this thing work. And for that, you don't need a very extensive vocabulary. But having said that, I have to clarify something. When we're talking about very important concepts in this tradition, very important concepts, like there's some idea that we can just be a free-flowing energy being and we don't ever have to use our intellect, and that's real Tantra. No, bullshit. That's not real Tantra at all, or Dzogchen, or Taoism. It takes an intellect. A human has an intellect. The intellect must be developed along with the energy, along with the body. It's ridiculous to think that. In this kind of a context, when we're going to discuss concepts that are so important to what guide your practice and explain the fruit of the path, we have to have the same vocabulary. And that vocabulary has to be precise. If it's not precise, serious problems. Right? I'm studying now the lectures and books and things of great teachers from Tibetan tradition, or not great teachers, I should say, famous teachers today, where they're using the Tibetan words incorrectly. And it's actually starting to show a pattern that they don't even understand their own view and their own practice. It's very interesting at times, some of these certain teachers. And I'm doing this as an exercise with one of my teachers. So it's important that we look at our vocabulary from the standpoint of having a precise way of getting direct denotation across to each other, not connotation. So that in that way, we have to have a very precise vocabulary. In that way, we have to know what the words mean precisely that we're going to use. And I'm trying to develop that in English right now. And it's turning out that because we have a lack of specific words, I'd have to either make up a brand new word, one word, or link a few together with hyphens to create what we want, like discursive mind versus essential mind, right? Personality display versus limited personality, this kind of thing. So we're working on this kind of thing. We have to really understand that. So I just want to put that side note in there, because as we get wowed by all the wonderful Tibetan and Sanskrit words in the Dharma world, Chinese words, whatever, it's rich and it's beautiful. And you probably won't know the meaning of this stuff unless a teacher who's very good in your language explains it to you, which I'm trying to do right now. Actually, I'm hopefully well-versed enough in English to bring this into our own sphere and have us really get a feel for what these terms describe. But without that, we're lost unless you go into that language, right? And I went into Sanskrit enough to understand it. I went into Tibetan, translated a text, and did enough to know and understand what I need to know about it to really be able to now develop in English what we need. And it's an ongoing practice for me, an ongoing study to refine these words and give us the best vocabulary possible, so that when we speak with each other in this system of Trika mahasiddha yoga, we use the proper terms. So when you ask me a question, I can give you the proper answer, right? So when you ask me questions that come from, like Samkhya Yoga loves to talk about Rajas, Tamas, and Sattva. I'm not a fan of Samkhya Yoga. I think it's, nice, whatever. It developed, it tried to help people, but it's not our system, and it's not the basis of our system either. So when we ask questions that come from Samkhya Yoga terminology in Trika mahasiddha yoga, I have to break down the question, take it apart, try to find out what you're really asking, and then put it into our own terminology, hopefully in English, which then, as acharyas get trained in other countries, they can go around and turn this English vocabulary into a local Dutch, French, Welsh, whatever, Chinese vocabulary. Yeah. All right. All right, Olga. So hope that helps you. Oksana? Yeah, that's correct. Both bondage and liberation. Okay. Olga, or Olga. I say that in Dutch style, right? When doing prostrations, I frequently get a headache. Is this normal, or am I doing something wrong? Okay. It's too hard for me to diagnose that at a distance. I haven't heard anybody say to me, hey, when I do prostrations, I get a headache. Am I doing something wrong? So Maybe look at how you might be holding your breath too long. Look at some things that could be possible diagnoses here or ways to diagnose. Are you holding your breath too long? Are you, in other words, like, is your heart rate going fast from doing the prostrations, but you're trying to keep it in a certain breath rhythm? So next time you try, just let your breath go natural. Don't think about it, timing your breath with the movements at all for now, and see if the headache thing goes away. If so, then I'd recommend that you match your breath to your movement in sections and not just try to hold it through the whole thing on one breath like I do, or maybe like your hubby has been showing you since he got back from retreat and got fine-tuned on his prostration practice. What else could it be? Channels clearing sometimes, detoxing. If you don't have a good diet, if you don't exercise regularly, those are possible because it is quite a physical exercise. But I would look to see first if you might be holding your breath or something, okay? Your second part of the question, how to deal with lack of motivation and resistance to doing sadhana. All right, well, that's why we have the preliminary practices. Go back to the preliminary program that you did. Go to the contemplations on suffering. Go to the contemplations on impermanence. And just go to the contemplations on self-grasping, self-image formation, and really contemplate again. I'm suffering. There's only one way out. I have to practice. If that doesn't inspire you, if your own suffering doesn't inspire you to move out of the situation you're in, from our perspective, Trika mahasiddha yoga perspective, you're getting a reward, a feedback that you like. You're getting gratified in some way by staying in your suffering, right? Unless the lack of motivation or resistance to doing sadhana is that you don't think it's necessary. If you think your life is fine and peachy keen, don't do sadhana. Don't get involved in spiritual work. Whatever you do, don't get a shaktipata. Don't get one-on-one with a teacher and all of a sudden have the doors open up because you're never going to close them again. And then your life will suck. And then you'll think afterwards, man, now I really know what suffering is and I really got to get out of it and I got no choice. I got to do sadhana. And usually that they say in our tradition, it's like 7 lifetimes or 9 lifetimes of that kind of clearing of your karma until you finally get into this state of realization because you didn't want it bad enough, right? But let's say that's not the problem. Let's say you really want liberation. You really understand mental, emotional, spiritual suffering. Then I think the only way to motivate you, really to motivate ourselves, is to go back to the foundation practices of the preliminary program, the preliminary practices, and understand how you really suffer and how it's not going to change unless you do something about it. That's contemplation. You sit there for a half hour and think about it. Seriously, think really deeply. Look at your suffering. If that doesn't motivate you to change, then I don't know what. In a person who has clinical depression, they might not find the motivation to change in that. And that's why when I work with someone who's got clinical depression, every single time I try to get their brain chemistry right first, because sometimes things are so locked in by the physical brain chemistry that just thinking I'm suffering and I want to get out of it makes you worse, actually. So because the brain is actually holding you back, the chemistry of the brain is actually holding you back. There's been too much free radical damage going on. The biochemistry is off. So if you just work out, it's amazing what can happen if you just do anaerobic HIIT training 4 times, 5 times a week, 12 to 15 to 20 minutes max, 4 or 5 times a week. That's it. The amazing changes in your brain chemistry are just enough to allow you to then do the contemplations on suffering and go, oh yeah, I don't want to be like that. And then actually use that. You'll become full of aspiration and you'll start to do your sadhana and be very happy to do your sadhana. Okay. Vajrabodha. Let the Holland people are here. And the Norse after that. Look at that. Okay. We have a mouse plague in our home. And to deal with it compassionately, we got ourselves a cat. Is that compassionate? The mice are trapped in your house? No. Yeah, it is. The cat turns out to be anything but a hunter. So the mice are roaming freely through our kitchen. Oh my gosh. What would be the most dharmic way to fight these creatures? Would poisoning them create negative karma? Oh man, this is all that ethical question. This is all that you have to decide what it is for you. There's no way to say, yes, you should poison them and it won't cause karma. It's all about your inner inner intention and your subtle motive, that's what creates our karma. Okay. So if you're, let's say you're a really poor person, the mice are eating all your food and your family is starving, you got to kill the mice, or you have to find a way to lead the mice away. It depends on you. Let me explain this. I'll give you a cute story. Grandfather Thundercloud, who adopted me into his tribe and made me his inheritor and left me all his stuff when he died, although his students who were supposed to hold it for me till I arrived from Australia stole it all. Lovely spiritual beings, right? Grandfather Thundercloud, one of my great teachers, I used to hang out at his house, and that's where we got teachings, at his house, and we'd take walks in the woods behind his house and go see the beaver dams and all that kind of thing. And one day, there's all these ants on his windowsill by his kitchen, and I never forget it. And, typical North Native American house, kind of like chaotic when you look at it from like a waspy white person standard of what decoration should look like, or cleanliness. It looks like chaotic, but it's beautiful, actually. It's natural. And there's these ants crawling all over this windowsill. And I see on the outside windowsill, I can see these little lumps of sugar. And I go, "What are you doing, TC?" And he said, "Oh, I got the ant people are coming into my house now. They're looking for some food. They're hungry. I'm going to lead them back outside." I mean, they were all over. On the inner windowsill was loaded with them, but they were going into his kitchen. They were carrying away the food. It's kind of funny. So, and I said, "Well, what are you doing?" So he showed me. "Oh, I put the sugar cubes out here to lead them out. I don't want to hurt the ant people," he'd say like this. So he's very gentle in his heart, very sweet. He eats meat. He ate hunted meat. But, Native American view on compassion around hunting is very different than like a PETA person or a vegan or something, very, very different. So his thing was that he wasn't opposed to killing in order to live. He was opposed to killing when you don't have to, which is the natural world usually, right? So he put the sugar outside, and I watched over a few days, and it led the ants outside. After we'd make these big Native American Indian sandwiches, I'd also say, "But it'd be probably good if we swept up the crumbs once in a while, though, TC. I think they're coming in for the crumbs, too." He was really old. He had big Coke bottle glasses. You could barely see at that time. So he's like, "Oh, yeah, that's a good idea, too." Really sweet. So you got to figure it out, get a killer cat or find a way to lead the mice outside. I'd try to get them outside some way first, maybe block up all the holes, maybe, whatever you can do. Like we had bats in our belfry, literally, in this house here, and we just couldn't get them out, and they were just going wild. And they're a health hazard. Their guano, their feces was piling up in piles that were 1.5 feet high, these little pyramids of poo, where they would hang out and drop the droppings from the rafters in my roof. And it was starting to come through the light fixtures, the holes, the drop ceiling lights, right? And I went to change the light and pulled the bulb out. Remember that, honey? And tons of bat guano just came down and covered the kitchen table where we sit and eat. And I was like, okay, this is too much. This has to go. I can't lead them out. I don't know how to lead them out. 70% of them have rabies, so I'm not grabbing them. So I hired the natural exterminators to do the best job they could do. So they put smoke in, and they got as many as they could to come out. And then he went to put in some poison. I said, "Wait, I hired you guys to be natural exterminators. What are you doing?" He said, "Well, some will always refuse to come out. So for them, we have to put baits inside. They eat them, they die." He goes, "Look at it this way. You saved like 99% of them. There's 1 or 2 that are going to die." I'm like, I guess that's the way it has to be, So they put the baits in there and they plugged up the holes in the roof, and that's what you have to do. So this is as long as you're working with it in a very compassionate way, in the best way you can, that's the idea, If you get too extreme, it gets too crazy, and you can't save your situation, right? But everything you can do to spare beings from being murdered is important. Killing for eating is different. Murdering is really against the rules, right? I'm sure you want to hear a cat about now, though. Get a weasel. Get a weasel. Those things will be gone in a second. Weasels are great for that, and they're a lot of fun. I like weasels. They're killers, man. So what would be the most dharmic way to fight them? Try to lead them out. Try to save them first. Would poisoning create negative karma? Depends. If you've done your best, then you did your best. Like the Dalai Lama was talking about this once. Okay, this is really kind of cute. He's a good yardstick for morality, I think. He eats meat, by the way. And he said, they said, who is it? It was Larry King. Larry King's had him on his show like 5 times. This American interviewer guy, but he had him on there, a TV guy. And he said, Lama, what do you do when a mosquito is biting you? He's trying to always catch the Dalai Lama out in some way. He asked him, are you afraid of death? All kinds of stuff. So he said, what do you do when a mosquito is biting you? And he calls him a Lama. I love this. Dalai Lama says, well, the first time he's biting me, I let him have some, and then I shoo, go away. After one bite's enough, And then the second time he come around, he's biting. Oh, go away. And then Larry King said, so what do you do the third time? He goes, third time. He goes like that, like he smacks it, he kills it. So, even if he's willing to be give it a little bit of leeway, okay, you can have a little bit. I owe you something with my karma, with you, little mosquito. This is the Buddhist view. But if you take too much, right? In Holland, there are a lot of people offering tantric massages, which turn out to be neo-tantric erotic massages. I have become aware of this in the past 2 years. It's mind-blowing that when I was just doing a conference for a Swedish group a few days ago, and what they think is tantra is tantric massage. And what tantric massage is either straight out prostitution or some people's whacked out idea of massaging people as a tantric yoga practice. While these massages are anything but truly tantric, correct, I was wondering if classical tantric massages exist. If they do, what makes them tantric? Well, that's a really great way to phrase the question. And let's be really clear about this for everybody watching from anywhere in the world. A lot of this was started by Daniel Odier. It doesn't all fall on his shoulders, but he did a lot to make the world think that there was this thing, a spiritual practice called tantric massage, which you massage your genitals and blah, 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 blah. You can take it from there. And there's no references for that. There's no references for that in the spiritual, in the tantric texts. There's no references for it in the oral tradition I've ever heard. Is there a way to massage a person to enhance sensuality, the ability to be sensible? Yes, of course. That's what massage does if you tune into it. Is there a way to eroticize massage so you're waking up energies in your red bindu that have been dormant? Of course, right? Of course. Why not? That's what people do in called foreplay in making love all the time. But you add a little oil and all of a sudden it's tantric massage. But so let's get right away this clear understanding that there is no tradition of tantric massage. And what I see it being done with it is really just people just screwing around. You're certainly not going to get enlightened that way. A lot of people say, oh, it's about healing. You can heal this way. Just let me get my hands on your yoni and you'll have healing. It's like, whoa, really? Yeah, let me take your jade stalk and I'll heal you. I'd really still steer clear of all that. That's really kind of crazy talk. So what were you saying about it? You were wondering if classical tantric massages do exist, and if so, what makes them tantric? Okay. The closest I can say that we get to this is that in one of the types of Maituna sadhana, one of the types of the yoga of sexuality that's practiced in tantric yoga, if indeed you practice it, not all people do, it's not mandatory, it's not even that well known, but one of the types involves consciously rechannelizing the energies of the subtle body in each partner. And in doing that, you may rub or press some points that may not be actually very pleasurable. Some of it may be kind of a little painful at times, but you may rub or press certain points and trace certain nadis with your hands over and over again, things like this, stroking and so on, to lead the energy in different centers and so on, right? So, but you can't really call that tantric massage, but there is the use of the hands, points, channels, and what would appear to be like sort of, you could say, massage strokes. And maybe someone heard about this, learned about this aspect of the practice and said, oh, let's create a massage form from that. Let's try to create a massage form out of that. And they came up with this thing, but it's not traditional. And I haven't seen it lead to any kind of deep realization. And in fact, it seems mostly to be a form of prostitution where people fool themselves thinking they're doing something great, healing somebody, but actually They're just making some money on pleasure. Wenke, hello, Norway. What are the main differences between tantric Ayurveda, primal Ayurveda, and the more modern transcendentalist stream of Ayurveda? Good question. One of the reasons I can't get with modern Ayurveda at all is that it is so transcendentalized, and it has become, the dogma of the transcendentalized Ayurveda has become so locked in, so solid, they won't budge, where it's become ridiculous to the point of they don't understand how eating meat could be good for a person's health anymore when they're out of disease. Sometimes these transcendentalist Ayurveda modern people will talk, well, you have to have a little bit of goat or a little bit of this or that right now because you're sick, and we'll make up for the bad karma of having to eat the goat product later or whatever kind of animal product. But once you're healthy, you should be strictly vegetarian. That's kind of ridiculous. There's not a lot of precedent for that in ancient Ayurveda where vegetarian is considered better. Even if you look into the mythology of India, you see how many of the Indian gods and goddesses were hunters, were eating meat. Krishna went hunting. What? But ISKCON, Society of Krishna Consciousness, is purely vegan, vegetarian. But Krishna was a hunter. Very interesting. Oh, well, he can get away with it, I guess. If you ask one of them, they'd probably say he was perfect being, so he could do it. Okay. Aren't we supposed to model ourselves after the perfect beings? Rama was what? A hunter, right. How did he lose Sita? He went out hunting with his brother and left Sita enclosed in a beautiful, magically protected thing, but she couldn't stop herself and had to step out of it, right? But here's the thing, he was hunting. They were going to get their food. Interesting, so interesting. And we can go on and on and on and on with all these stories of who was hunting, right? All the heroes of the Mahabharata, these enlightened beings, they're all hunters. They're all out hunting, okay? So one of the things, and I'm not saying everybody should be a meat eater. You should do it exactly what you want. But vegetarianism should not be seen as the only option. And it shouldn't be seen as the Ayurvedic option. That's the point. That's a really important point. There are many, many texts that I've read and many instructions I've received. I mean, many, going into retreat with great yogins who have said from Tibetan side of the mountains and the Indian side, don't take vegetables during this retreat. You can only have fats and meats and grains. I was like, really? Yes, only. Why? Because the vegetables are going to raise your wind too much. They're going to create too much wind disorder. I was like, wow, that's interesting. And if you look at Ayurvedic text, even as recent as Ashtanga Hridayam, there are like 30, 40 pages of meat recipes. Interesting. And there's 30, 40 pages of descriptions of the animals and the meats and the organs and how they affect the doshas, right? But people don't often reference this stuff anymore. So that's one of the big differences, is getting out of the rigid views that have been passed down by post-Buddhist influenced Ayurveda. Buddhism is what did it. Buddhism really had a heavy, heavy hit on Ayurveda, and it did a lot of great things for Ayurveda as well. Created lots of public gardens and lots more training, and where there were Ayurveda, like the Emperor Ashoka made public gardens of Ayurveda in every place in India, and then had trained Ayurvedic physicians who would sit in those gardens and take people's pulses and give them herbs right out of the garden to treat them, and lifestyle advice, whatever. So there's some great stuff that happened by Buddhism influencing Ayurveda. But, throwing the baby out with the bathwater, the view of Buddhism around this idea of complete vegetarianism is the only way to go came in. A little bit of transcendentalism came in. And the idea that we are these, like the old ancient Rishi idea, that when you're balanced, this universe is a beautiful place. This human realm is a beautiful place. When you're balanced, when you're in a balanced relationship with nature, this is a great place and it's beautiful and you experience the fruit of it so much easier, right? That kind of went out a little bit, I think, and went more towards transcendentalism of you got to leave this realm. We do eventually have to leave this realm. There's no doubt about it. Our consciousness has to go to bigger and better things. But there's a way of being with this realm and embracing it as a beautiful thing. And Ayurveda was originally a part of that journey, right? Which could lead to relative immortality. So the rigidity around diet is crazy. Like when I was studying with Dr. Lad at Ayurvedic Institute, if you'll notice when you read Ayurvedic text, you don't see a lot of mushroom references. Dr. Lad was very big on saying mushrooms are tamasic. We used that word earlier today. It's one of the reasons I don't like to use sattva, rajas, and tamas, because it's so easy to just label something. Don't digest it in your mind, really work it scientifically and understand, is that accurate or not? So Dr. Lad said, mushrooms are tamasic. In other words, they're going to take you basically into darkness, ignorance, off your spiritual path, out of spiritual reality if you eat too many mushrooms. Same as said of garlic and onions. So I found that a ridiculous statement when you have Taoists living on mushrooms, cherishing mushrooms, praising them, So, okay, there's got to be something wrong here. Where did this happen? And I said to Dr. Lad, why do you see mushrooms this way? Well, because they're shaped like penises. I said, you got to be kidding me, seriously. And not all mushrooms are shaped like penises. So these ideas are really strange, really silly, and we have to change them. So primal Ayurveda goes back to understanding in the diet sense, how did we eat for the last 2 million years? What caused the growth of our brains in the last 2 million years? In the way they grew, that was due to meat and fire. Very simple. That was due to eating animals and using fire. So I think we have to understand these things and we have to keep updating Ayurveda. But in this case, it's more like looking back. It's like the old is the new, It has to be like this. And there's many, many examples we could cite of the differences. Like modern Ayurveda, you don't exercise hard. And that's a serious problem because human beings, I don't know if you know this, what's the fastest animal on the planet? Running wise, land animal, cheetah. What's the animal that can run the farthest on the whole planet? Human. Yeah, we can outrun any animal. Why can we outrun any animal on the land? Because we can regulate our breathing. How did we become such great meat eaters? Well, the big predators that were after us, they got reduced. We learned how to work in groups and packs better, Homo sapiens, right? And then what happened was we figured out that we could just chase these animals until they dropped dead from exhaustion, and we just put a spear in them and take them home. So when we look at how we've been eating, how we've been functioning, and what produced our bodies, that type of activity of sprinting after an animal and then carrying it home, a heavy 150, 200-pound animal, whatever, on your back, the meat of it, or even 50 pounds, just try sprinting with 50 pounds for a while. If some predator's chasing you because you got meat on your back and you're sprinting to get back, that's a hell of a workout. Not to mention the killing of the animal running after it. So our bodies were designed, our brain development came out of exercise. Our bodies are designed for exercise, hard exercise. Our brain development came out of it. And ever since we've gone on the tear of more and more sedentary lifestyles, which happens with civilization, which is what brought Ayurveda in its modern form to us, the Buddhism and civilization of India. We've gotten away from using our bodies in a way that keeps them vital, that keeps them the way they were designed to be. We can't adapt this quickly to being sedentary, right? So this is another problem with modern Ayurveda, is that they're not big on exercise. Oh, it's going to imbalance you. Oh, the idea is like you keep so quiet and so still your whole life that you're like perfectly preserved. You're like a little thing inside a glass jar sitting on the shelf. Look at Aunt Mabel. She's so well preserved with her Ayurveda. She can't do anything though. Can't carry an 80-pound bag of luggage up the stairs, but it's really sweet to see her there, and it's not how we're meant to be. It's just something wrong. But doing the kind of exercise that's damaging to the body, that's not good either. But we have to understand that a certain amount of stimulation is really optimal for having optimal health, period. I might as well segue into this too, because the idea that we should be vegetarian and eat a lot of vegetables, leafy vegetables and stuff, this is not a good idea. All vegetables have a lot of toxins. All vegetables have a lot of toxins. Let me explain that again. All vegetables have a lot of toxins. Every time you eat them, your body has to deal with these toxins. There are negative biochemical effects, physiological effects every time you eat a vegetable. Yes, true, no matter how you cook it. Sometimes cooking certain ways will reduce that toxic effect. But when you just focus on veggies, when Ayurveda nowadays is all about veggies, you're actually aging yourself. You're making yourself toxic. Because what happens is the veggies that go in our body that we say are good for us, like antioxidants and so on, they usually don't contain antioxidants themselves. What they usually do is come in and through the toxicity of the plants, they stimulate an antioxidant reaction in our own cells, in our own cellular metabolism, so that we start producing our own antioxidants, which are super powerful, the ones we produce in our own body. So, it's been found over time that you eat a certain kind of plant and it stimulates this great reaction, right? Okay, that's because it's toxic actually and produces this great reaction where your body overcompensates and you get healthy. What if you could do that without introducing the toxin? There's the question. You can do that with exercise. Absolutely. Everything you get from any kind of antioxidant stimulating plant that you eat or mineral that you eat, you can do with exercise in your own body. Your own system can produce even more powerful antioxidants, right? And so this is how we have to understand this. Now, you look at old ancient Ayurveda, vegetables were used much more sporadically. There is a lot of warnings about vegetables in the text. This one will make too much of this, too much of that dosha, hit these organs. It's really interesting. And you're pushed towards, if you understand it, then you're pushed towards what? Milk, meat, cheese, grains, a little bit of fruit. Now we're moving out of the toxic range, right? The heavy toxic range of vegetable foods, which are very toxic. And we're moving more into the range of less toxic foods. So this is another adjustment that primal Ayurveda has to go through. I would always, in the past, and especially when I had Trika method going, tell people, look, have 70% of your plate vegetables and 20% meat and 10% grain, something like that. And now I want to adjust that a bit. There's a lot of reasons we thought that was good then, and now we're realizing it's not really as good as we thought it was. It might be okay for some people, but in general, it's much better to go towards a diet that's lower in toxicity, even if you want to be a vegetarian. I would go much more towards the sides of carbohydrates and carbohydrates that are giving me more minerals, because that's what you're going to miss a lot of, and certain vitamins if you're a vegetarian. And I would supplement a lot. I would just supplement a lot if that was the way I was going to do it. So a long answer, sorry to go into it, but there's a lot of reasons why Ayurveda needs to change, why I'm calling it Ayurveda, but actually primal Ayurveda, is because we're just going back to what happened in the beginning, how we used to function. That should be what Ayurveda is, right? Not some contorted way to make it work now in an urban society. It should be what's best for a human body, right? And that's where we're going. Okay, Venke. How common is it that people on this planet follow their nadis to its fullest potential? Great question. Not very common, because if they did, we'd have a lot more enlightened people. Just remember that. That's why there's Atma Shakti training. My friend was told she was following her nadi about 60%. Well, it's pretty hard to put a number on it, but is that common for people to follow? I barely see people doing that, even if I were to give it a number. I see most people trying to make a nadi for themselves that's not natural for them. That's what I see, because they don't know themselves. If you don't know yourself, you're going to try to make some other reality your reality. You're going to follow the Kardashians on TV and so put some more silicone into your ass and more silicone in your boobs and get some liposuction on your abdomen, and like one of those girls, I can't remember her name, completely restructured her face. So, Interpol wouldn't be able to find her. So, we don't know our nadi anymore because we don't know ourselves. And I think that's the crucial thing. So because of that, because we're not contemplative, because we're not self-reflective, because we don't seek out good astrology like Suki and I practice that can really give you these wonderful boundaries of our nadi, within which you have some freedom, free will to make what you want out of it. People then start going down, here's your nadi like this. They start going down side tracks, and you get lost in these side tracks trying to be a great business person or a great entrepreneur. Because Tony Robbins said, everybody can achieve great wealth if they want to. Well, he's an idiot. If he was sitting right here in the audience with me right now, I'd say, you're an idiot. You may be trying to help people, but I really don't think so. I think you're trying to make a lot of money. I know that's going to land me in hot water with a lot of you, but I don't really care, because I got to tell you what I really think. I grew up in that whole self-help, inspiration, go get it thing. I'm 60, man. I grew up in all that shit. I know. I grew up with the hippies. I grew up with the self-helpers. I grew up with the yuppies that came out of the self-helper hippies and just wanted to get rich. I grew up with the Osho crap, the Bhagwan Rajneesh crap. I grew up with all of it, all the cults. I saw it all. Reverend Sung Myung Moon. You don't even know. You have no idea what cult leaders are nowadays. These little yoga cult leaders. There were some serious cult leaders that had millions of followers who were all drinking the Kool-Aid and dying and stuff. So I've seen all this stuff, and it's simply not true that you can be anything you want to be. It's simply not true. And when you pursue that kind of a thing, when you pay Tony Robbins 10 grand for a few days of a workshop, and he starts telling you, you can be anything you want, you can do it, just break through these limitations. And he's a jerk, the way he works with people in the audience. You watch these people just get in their faces and be really rude and urge them off their nadis to follow this carrot at the end of the stick so you can be rich and famous and charismatic like me, and go off their nadi and watch them destroy their lives. I have no respect for him. No respect for any of those people that do it. I don't think they're helping anybody except those people that are already on their nadi, giving them a little bit of inspiration. And guess what? They would have gotten there anyway, but $10,000 richer if they didn't pay that numbskull for $10,000 to hear him, go on and waffle. So this is how I feel about it. I feel very strongly about this, that people are being taken by this kind of thing. Stick to your nadi. Get your nadi read by the astrologers that are good astrologers, and then discover how you can maximize it with your skill set in this lifetime, with your available resources, because then you're going down a path of least resistance. And it doesn't take $10,000 to find your nadi. You take the Atma Shakti training and you learn how to just do it yourself. You experiment, but it's good to have that. I got to say, it is good to have that kickstart with the astrology though, because, some people are really lost at sea. And for 1 out of 28 people, every 28 people, roughly we can say, there's a certain kind of astrological karmic indication that says they can choose whatever they want to do and be really good at it, and they can just do it. But they have to choose really strongly and go down that narrow lane and not continually try everything a little bit, because inwardly they have this sense of, I could do almost anything. And they do. They could. But for leaving out that one group of people who hardly ever choose and go strongly down it, that's the other problem. For 99% of us, right, we have to know our nadi, know our boundaries, our innate capacities, see what we can do to maximize that. Then we're going down a path of least resistance. Then we're producing more merit, more good karma for ourselves and for others. And that builds in our karmic model more what? Kriyamana karma to make choice, and then more agama karma, more spiritual karma. We bring to ourselves much better opportunities when we're following our nadi, you see. But in your short answer to your question, no, I don't see a lot of people following their nadi because it's difficult for people to find their nadi today. They have too many choices. They're told everything is possible. And the young people, Generation Z, and to a fair bit, millennials, they don't have any guts. They have no balls. They basically can't follow through, and they can't do anything that's uncomfortable. Well, life is uncomfortable, folks. Get with it. And if you want to be successful at something, you better be ready to experience a lot of discomfort, right? Just look at champion athletes and look how they train. Does it look comfortable? No. So the same thing in that analogy fits for everything in life, okay? But then when you get going down your nadi really well, then effort doesn't feel like struggle anymore. You're not so worried about comfort anymore because you're actually enjoying the effort that you put in, the reward that you get from your work. You feel good about it. You feel pride in yourself, Vajra pride in what you're doing, because it has benefit for all beings. You see, when you're on a nadi, one of the key characteristics of being on a nadi is that it benefits all beings. This is very beautiful, right? Yeah, not many people doing a nadi, nutshell. Number 3 from Wenke. After practicing awakening higher chakra function, doing a lot of repetitions, good. I became aware of doing it wrong. Oh no. After listening through the tutorial once more, I didn't use the dietary suffix on lower and middle levels. That's okay. That's okay. I have now included it. However, wondering if those previous ones would count towards, they count towards your 100,000. It's an honest mistake. No problem. Just use it now. Okay. Jorge. The explanation on the path stages has been like a spinal column for me to understand more where I am standing. I heard you once say that when properly channeled and transformed, lust could be a powerful energy for advancing on the path. Absolutely. And it should be like one of the first ones we look into. As I look inside, I see enormous amounts of lust, attachment, and anger, and I don't know how to work with that without repressing them. I feel stuck. They are mentioned at the foundation practices when doing cleansing of the channels, but I feel there must be other ways to address them, to transform their limitation and move forward in the path. Which formal or integration practices should I do to help that process? Is doing some kind of tapasya recommended? Okay, so this is a big topic, and I don't think working with lust in a technical way can be described very well in this format, okay? But let's give you a few exercises. One of the things is that one of the principles of Trika mahasiddha yoga is that you can do practice on the cushion every single day, let's say to transform lust. Let's say you do a formal practice to transform lust, a Kriya yoga thing or something, a visualization, whatever, a mantra. And then, but you're doing it every day for years. But when you go out into the marketplace to buy your food for the week or something, you know, you see somebody and the lust grips you so strongly, the thoughts are generated. I got to have him, her, it, they, blah, whatever pronouns you use nowadays. I got to have that thing. See, it turns everybody into a thing. Or I got to be with that person. And then the energy is generated. You feel your red bindu activated. You can actually feel it in your body. And then the emotions are activated. How great it would be to feel that pleasure. Oh, maybe I could get married to that person. We could live in that pleasure forever. You know, all this kind of stuff gets generated. Thought patterns are coming. But you've been doing the seated practice every single day. Okay. If you can transform it in that moment when it arises, it's said in mahasiddha yoga that that's 1,000 times more beneficial than doing it when you're seated. And that has been my experience too. So I like the seated practice. I like the integration meditation as well. So 2 kinds of integration meditation when it comes to lust. Transform, I'm just going to give you rough principles. You can go and work it out. And then when you come to Red Bindu trainings and other trainings that we offer, then we can get more techniques. First, when in the integration training aspect, when you're out there in the world, try to see whatever you feel is the object of your lust. Let's just say it's women, I'm going to say for this moment, but this is an example. Every woman you see, have something you say inside your head. Mother, you know, mother, creatrix, you know, if you're into deities like Durga or something. So immediately shift yourself out of object consciousness. Even mother might not shift you out of it, but there has to be some sense of, maybe you could say sentient being. Every time you see someone, sentient being, you know, nature of mind. Like they have their own Shiva nature. And it's not respectful for us to try to lust after and use that Shiva nature, that person's body encasing that Shiva nature, right? So some way to do that is useful. One of the ways that I worked out that my teachers gave me when I was younger working with the lust is to say each woman as a mother. So mother, I'd say mother, and then immediately I'd see a child suckling at her breast. So mother and suckling. But some people told me that turned them on. Okay, that didn't work. So we'll try something else. Mother and period, you know, tired, dark circles, blood pouring out of the yoni, you know, not happy, see the person like that. Or see this woman as like when I'm in the moment when I'm feeling the lust. You got to feel the lust, right? That's activated. Oh my gosh, I catch myself in the pro forma we did in the alchemy workshop, emotional alchemy. Oh, I catch myself in the feeling of lust. Whoa, I'm in the middle of it. It's too late to stop it. It's already started. Now I have to do something with it. Okay. Then in that moment, when that energy is up, this is the most prime moment to recondition and change the lust pattern. And it will change, especially if you catch it in those moments, as well as the seated practice at home. So in that moment, when it comes up, another thing I would use if it was really tough, it really had the lust going hard, I'd say, I'd see the person sick, old, debilitated, wrinkled up, vomiting, sores all over their body, diarrhea happening. I'd see it all happening. I would overlay that visual just to remind myself, this is not an object, not a frozen image. This is a human being. And no matter how much they're stimulating I'm stimulating my lust by looking at them, they are an autonomous, independent being. They have a Shiva nature, etc. And I have to realize that what I'm looking at is just a snapshot, and it's a projection of my own desire onto them because they aren't beautiful like that all the time. in the movie, in the magazine, on the street, dolled up to go out. No, they get sick sometimes. They get sick, they die, right? They poop when they're sick. They have menstruation. They're, all this. You got to see the whole package. That can be powerful to cut the pure lust situation. And it's not enough to do that, because then in that moment, you have to turn it towards love, highest love, and towards compassion. And like, how great. Now I see you as a being, not as an object. Wow. Now I have a potential to actually have some kind of mutually informative and nurturing and nourishing relationship, even as a friend, just communicating. But if I just were to use you from my lust, that just makes me more conditioned down the pattern of using you from my lust. So this way of working with your consciousness in lust in the moment when it's arising is really important. Then, if you learn how to do certain things like a mula bandha, a deep breath into your red bindu and squeeze the mula bandh in that moment while you're doing it. Maybe you're waiting on the bank line. Everybody's on the bank line and you're lusting after the teller. Then you hold it, you bring the energy up to your heart, you come to that love and compassion place of oneness, of everybody has their own essence, nature, and I'm respecting yours, I'm honoring yours. You exhale. And that love, compassion, respect comes on. Everything's changed. And you're like, wow, I don't even want to use that person anymore. If you're good at manipulating your energy from the seated practice, you can use it in the integration moments. That's really powerful. You draw it up to your heart, you exhale, you let it out. And then you're like, wow, I'm one with this person. And then I think what's even more important, or very important, is like this third step, making a little pro forma here from the way I was taught. You then afterwards, you ask yourself, what do I feel right now? Now in that reflexive moment, before lust comes back, before I generate it with thoughts again, what do I feel? Wow, I don't want to use that person. That feels dirty. It feels wrong. I'm not even excited about that idea. I feel like a lowlife if I were to think that. All I want to do is share a cup of tea, talk about the weather, vibe in this humanity together. And that's really powerful. Okay. Am I going too long? The other way to do this is in the moment of making love, or if you don't have a partner, in the moment of self-pleasuring, training yourself how to not feel that the person's an object, training yourself in that shared experience of sensuality to bring us more into our present moment, into our sensual body, more into the possibility and potentiality of recognizing that that awareness and that energy are one in us. And we do that with a partner, and then we both are celebrating together this experience of being able to dive down deep into our own energy. Thanks. So in that moment, some Nedi's still moving. In that moment when you're making love or when you're self-pleasuring, and I in the pro forma that we lay out in Red Bindu training, it's so much better to do self-pleasuring first, to get control of your own energy before you enter into another person's field. If you enter into making love with another person and try to do this right away, it can be difficult. But if you have a marriage partner that you've been with for a very long time and it's very common, you're very intimate with each other, you can probably enter into that kind of dynamic almost right away with your marriage partner because you're so familiar with each other. Although it may wake up new levels of intimacy, new levels of all kinds of things. And with that can come sometimes new levels of shame, embarrassment, lust, all kinds of new things can come. But in that moment, if you do it with self-pleasuring before you have a partner, or you do it with your current partner, you're making love. What you should do is try to feel the pleasure and try to feel like you don't own that pleasure. Try to get to the place where you understand that pleasure is a universal energy. Everybody has access to it. Nobody owns it. And go deeper into the caring for the partner that's making this reflection for yourself possible. And open your heart in that deep sense of divine romance, eros, And then really move towards your heart in the lovemaking. So the pleasure is still there. The genitals are still in contact, or the mouth, or whatever. Doesn't matter. But the love has been accessed while the physical is still going on. And then it provides a greater context, a wider context, where the energy of the lust doesn't become such a like strong, condensed kind of smallish feeling, which leads to orgasm. Then afterwards, there's nothing. But instead, the lust drives the feeling of the love, drives the feeling of the compassion, drives the feeling of the connection, the intimacy, drives the feeling of less self-identity for you and the partner, less projection onto the partner of an identity as hot and I got to do you kind of thing, and less projection of yourself as someone who needs that to be fulfilled. And I can't get that feeling within my own essence energy. I have to get it from the outside. And it gives that context of that great heart chakra, blue bindu kind of opening. And then if you can, it's possible that the lust is so decreased at that point that the sexual arousal drops through the floor and disappears. That's very normal. But, that's no horrible outcome. You're left with love, higher virtue. But it's also possible with training that the training and experience that the pleasure, no longer lust, but the pleasure of being with another person can still be generated inside that incredible experience of love. Knowing the difference, though, is what makes Neo-Tantra versus real Tantra. I don't think in Neo-Tantra, oh my God, what is in my throat today? I don't think that in Neo-Tantra, there's enough foundation training, preliminary training, excuse me, to identify when I'm in sexual contact with a person, when it's real love versus high infatuated titillation that were generated because I'm in some kind of pseudo-spiritual Neo-Tantra school. And is it real love? Like that comes with all the things that real love gives, the ability to hang with that person while they're going through difficulties. What if they didn't want to have sex with you for 5 years after that? What if they went to jail for 3 years? Would you have to go out and be polyamorous immediately? Because you can't just deal with that situation? Is that the extent of your love and your loyalty and so on and so on? So the difficulty is sometimes telling the difference, but it can be exercised during sexuality as well. And learning how to transform that into the higher virtue of heart love allows you to do that in integration moments during the day when it's up, when it's really hard, when it's really ripe, when it's really strong energy, that lust is up. This is really important. This is how we make progress. We don't make progress only by being on the cushion. In fact, quite often it doesn't work that well to only do it on the cushion. Yeah.
Same question, but with anger.
Is it in the thing here? Can I read it?
At the very bottom.
At the very bottom. By the way, I'm Jorge. No, mental thanks. Above. Where is it above that?
What about anger?
That's the next part, the follow-up? Okay. So, yeah, anyway, get the emotional alchemy course. It's getting a bit much here to redo the whole course. But anger is the same. So when we're on the path, lust and anger are the big ones driving us. We go through the same kind of pro forma. Now, you're not going to use it like by beating a person up, but though you may get in martial arts to work out how to deal with that. I worked out how to deal with anger a lot in my rugby days, to tell you the truth, and in my fighting days, my amateur fighting days. So that's possible. But it's the same kind of pro forma. You want to identify how the anger keeps you separate from the other person and thereby diminishes your ability to know your own nature as one with all beings. And how we're no longer respecting and holding them dear as a sentient being, even if we disagree with what they say. That's what's so wrong about cancel culture today. You can't disagree with somebody without having them hate you. It's like crazy. Disagreement is the whole basis of academia, to find the higher truths and debate and all that kind of stuff. If every time someone presents something to you that you don't like and then you shut them down, you get angry about it, basically you're infantile, number one. And number two, you're missing out on a world of possibility there. Number three, you're separating from that person as a sentient being and you've completely devolved at that moment. All the people practicing anger, cancel culture, being offended, they're all just hell realm beings that are ruining their spiritual development. So anger has to be worked with too. You can do it on the cushion, but like all the practices we know. Then you got to do it live in the moment, and it follows the same kind of pro forma. You have to get underneath this objectification of the other person as perpetrator, as someone you hate, or someone that's a predator, or whatever we have. And we've got to get to that feeling of seeing them for what they really are. And a clarity will develop. And maybe you can actually hear what they're saying. Maybe it's not correct what they're saying. Maybe it's correct, but you get to clarity. And in clarity, that's a very essential part of being an awake being, you know, and eventually you can also reestablish the heart connection through that clarity once again. Okay. So just in brief, let me get the rest of your question here before we go on to the next one. Did we do it? Some kind of tapasya? Not really tapasya, you know, removing yourself from situations where lust is too great for you to handle, that's great, as long as you're really trying to work it in the practices and transform it. Because you can't just keep removing yourself from every situation that has people that you find attractive. Otherwise, you can't function in life, right? Hopefully that helped you a bit, I hope. The Red Bindu, Awakening the Red Bindu trainings, I think are very good for this. But obviously that's done in person here. Yov has 4. Let's see if I can rock them and try to get onto some questions. Did new ones come in online or no? On the chat? Okay. Okay, let's do that. So follow up to the last one.
Louisa, how is anger related to lust and emotional alchemy?
Someone's asking, how is anger related to lust in emotional alchemy? It's not so important that we try to find a relationship between them. I wouldn't even bother looking for it, except that some people switch between the two emotions quite rapidly because they're just buffers. So that's the truth there. Like people can often switch between anger and lust quite quickly. And knowing that those are the right and left channel kind of energies all day long, you know, that's kind of how we're bouncing around all day long anyway. So they're not related per se. We don't need to find an intrinsic relationship, except that they're all based in our essence energy. They all arise from our base. And when experienced directly, without the mental, emotional conditioning and tension, they instantly are experienced as virtues. So they have the relationship of both being virtues. And the potentiality of releasing them is the same in both as well. Release the contraction of the emotion and get to the virtue. But there's no need to like find some special relationship between the two, that one triggers the other. You have to do this one before you do that one, or nothing like that. Okay. Yov. Shunya, Nirvikalpa Samadhi, Nirvana, Mukti, Jivan Mukti, Mahasamadhi, Bhava Samadhi, Turiya, Turyatita, dissolution of the causal body. How do I define them? I'm not going to define those terms. Sorry, buddy. That's a little too work on here. Where do they overlap? How are they different? Where do they fit in a 12-stage view? Okay. We don't use these terms. We don't use them at all. I stay out of the Sanskrit jargon as much as I can. The 12-stage view map clearly shows what stage our awareness and our energy are developed in, you know, and if you've done foundations, no, prelims, foundations, where's 12-stage view? Foundations? Prelims. So if you've done the prelim training and you've done the 12-stage view in the prelim training, even though it's the outer level teachings, you'll start to see what level of consciousness we have in each one. So, because actually scholars disagree with Turiya, Turyatita, they disagree between themselves. Does it mean the ultimate absolute beyond any form and no form and still here in the world? No, you have to be without a body. Okay. So each tradition defines these very differently. Okay. So if you're asking me how we define them in TMY, we don't even really use them. Shunya, Shunya, the openness state, the pure emptiness of our spacious hosting. That's Shunya. The pure spacious hosting. Not a concept of it, not a state, nothing but pure wide openness. That's it. That's the pure shunya, where nothing sticks, where nothing stands, where there's no permanence. Okay, that's shunya. For Buddhists, it's shunya. For Shaivas, it's bunya. For Trika Mahasiddha yoga people. These different kind of samadhis, that's all Samkhya Vedanta talk, and I think it's quite delusory to chase down all these different levels of samadhi and so on, because I actually think from my view that I've received from my teachers and the practices, I don't think it really leads to any kind of, what can you say? Maybe you become a better person, but it just gets you caught up in distinctions that aren't quite necessary in a certain sense. Nirvana opposite of samsara. Even nirvana has to be let go at some point. Nirvana is all the good stuff. But, you know, again, making these terms is not so important. Mukti, freedom, release. Jivan Mukti, someone who's alive and free. Mahasamadhi means the great samadhi beyond any kind. It's like Mahamudra, actually, but people now use it for death of a saint. Oh, he's taking the great Mahasamadhi. She's taking the great Mahasamadhi. She's going into the great meditation. Maybe she is. Anyway, I'm not really into these kind of things. Dissolution of the causal body, that's like, I don't even have this causal body stuff in our vocabulary. So I'm sorry, Yov. Don't mean to piss you off there or anything, but yeah, we don't really use them. We don't define them. I think it's better to reach the system directly as it is, not try to overlap. I found a lot of trouble with students. Well, I come from this, and I want to know how this correlates with that. I come from Vajrayana. How does that correlate with this in Shaivism? Or I come from Vedanta. How does that correlate? Or what is Nirvikalpa Samadhi of Patanjali's in this one? And I say, it's not in this one. It's not that system. So even if we use the same words, we're going to define it completely different. So I stick to the English use and trying to explain in detail the energetic experience and consciousness experience of each of the stages of 12-stage view or the fruit of a practice. This is where it's more practical and more pragmatic, okay? Hope you can hear that and not think I'm blowing you. I'm really not blowing off your question. It's just important not to drag things over from other systems and just take ours fresh as it is. A lot of people have memories from other lives, so they say, either arising spontaneously or using hypnosis, or Patanjali style, doing some yama on their samskaras. Do you see them any use to working? Do I see any use to working with them? Does TMY has a model that deals with complex topic of reincarnation? So reincarnation is very wide open. We have a model where you can think about it through the linear time, and it works like that, but that's not the fullest understanding of how reincarnation works. So beyond that, it's a very, very, very wide open concept that has to do with many models of time, of how time works. So that's kind of like your fifth dimension kind of discussion. And it's not very pragmatic. It doesn't really help very much, at least until stage 9, late 8, stage 8, stage 9. That's where that becomes a practical topic you can discuss with your teacher as you're doing practices that break down those time experiences, and bleed through start occurring between the different types of times. And that can become problematic, unless you've got your life kind of handled by then in certain ways, and other people can help you a lot, keeping yourself on track. So anyway, where was it? Do we work with past lives? No, we don't really. In Trika mahasiddha yoga, we don't really work with past lives that much. We don't try to find them out. We used to go to India to go to nadi readers that we trusted, but my dear brother that we trusted on that has passed away. So I don't trust a lot of nadi readers now in India. I think they're now I'm talking about past life nadi, not what we do as nadi readings. I don't trust a lot of the guys I meet now. There's probably some that are still doing it, but my astrology guru at the time only recommended one person, and he knew India pretty well and had a lot of recommendations and new people. So I was like, yeah, I'm not very impressed, and I'd shy away from it. So we don't do that anymore. Even when we did that, it wasn't about the past lives that we were so interested in. It was in what happened then that's showing up now that we have to take care of. And being mahasiddha yoga, we are super pragmatic. We go with the Buddha's teaching. Whatever you were doing before, you're doing now. It doesn't make any sense in a karma model whatsoever that you were in a linear life. 2 lives back, you were Julius Caesar, and now you're like a pauper. It doesn't make any sense whatsoever. Usually you're staying in the same gender. Usually you're staying in the same professions, a general category of professions. Usually you're running with the same kind of haplogroup, you could say spiritual haplogroup, like a same posse of 300-400 people over and over and over. A little exchange happens here and there. So what's most important for us in Trika mahasiddha yoga, yes, we deal with past lives. How? What's happening now? That's how we deal with them, because the only way you're going to dissolve past life karma is to deal with what's now. You're never going to go back in the past and dissolve that. It's total rubbish. It doesn't happen. You got to deal with it here and now, because you are the fruit of the past now. Okay? If going into the past life helps you understand it, gives you some inspiration to work with in this lifetime and change it now, fantastic. That's when that's really useful. When it becomes, I was this in my past lives, and becomes a reason for failing, a reason for giving into your patterns. Oh, look, I was such a jerk again. That's because of this past life. That's justifying your karma. That's no good, right? justifying your samsara. So when it becomes all that, then it's completely useless. And when you're paying a lot of money to have hypnotic regression over and over again and do all this past life recall, recovering all this stuff, okay, maybe it's going to be useful. But like I said, only in the context of, do you see the patterns that you have right now, and are you going to deal with them now? Or are you going to be thinking about all the past life stuff and giving yourself all this slack because, oh, I can't help it. It's past life karma. You got to deal with it now. That's how we work with it. It's not very sexy. You can't make a lot of money on it. Theosophy, very intriguing. Some of it seems great to me, like Leadbeater's books on clear vision, but I feel some forced coherency, and the narrative is fairy tale-ish. Atlantis, aliens. How do you view Theosophy? I think it's an interesting fairy tale. Yeah. So I don't deal with it. I don't really deal with Theosophy. I don't promote it. I don't want to put it down. I don't do anything. I read about it myself for a while, and I was like, well, somebody was, inspired to try to figure out something spiritual in modern Europe, disconnected from their pagan traditions. Okay. But yeah, I don't do it because it doesn't give liberation. I'm only, I'm only interested in the liberation paths and only those that give light body. That's what mahasiddha yoga is. For all you out there wondering, what is mahasiddha yoga? Why you call it Trika mahasiddha yoga? Has that ever been, someone said, oh, I didn't see it anywhere in Wikipedia, so you made up that term. Yeah, I did. We made up that term. Clearly, Trika mahasiddha yoga. We didn't make up mahasiddha yoga. It's been around forever. Those are people that become stage 10 immortals and eventually light body, rainbow light body. Now, anybody who does that is a mahasiddha. And any person who did that, who gave teachings, those are mahasiddha teachings. They could have been a Vajrayanist, Tibetan Buddhist. They could have been a Bumpo, pre-Tibetan Buddhist practice in India, Tibet. They could have been a Dzogchenpa, practicing Dzogchen meditation. Could have been a Taoist, could have been a Zen, could have been a Chan, could have been a whatever, Kashmir Shaivist, Shakta person. It doesn't matter what they were. As soon as they hit stage 10, none of that matters anymore. They're beyond all sectarianism. They're beyond everything, and their teachings reflect it very clearly. However, they know that we as sentient beings need progressive stages to work through. Stage 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, to get to stage 10 to become a mahasiddha. So you can work towards being a mahasiddha in any system that can produce, that has it in its view and understanding that we can be a spiritual, immortal, and rainbow light body. Right? But we have to go through the stages and go through the steps of those systems. That's the only thing that Trika mahasiddha yoga deals with, right? So all of the text teachings, all the oral teachings, all the practices, all the retreats that I've been put through, all these things are there from those direct lineages. We are directly in the line of the light body, stage 10, 11, 12 light body masters, directly, and not from billions of years ago, right? Recently as well. So, yeah, so I don't care about Theosophy, to be quite honest, to put it in a nutshell. All right. Number 4, many practices, vidyas in their early stages make sense from a modern perspective, but then they cross a line to seemingly impossible. Like in Rasa Vidya, you have, for example, the Ashta Samskaras on Mercury. Actually, I learned 11 Samskaras on Mercury, more than 8, that seem to make sense scientifically. But then comes things like Gagana Gamana and Svarnakarna, flying in the air and creating gold. Or with Vajroli. I think you mean Vajroli, not Vajroli, right? Obviously, one can suck up fluids with his urethra, but then you should eventually suck up mercury and it should come out of your hair. What's going on here? Okay, are you saying that you don't believe in the higher stage practices when they say you can fly or you can suck the mercury up with your old fella and it comes out your ear or your nose? What's going on there? When we enter into higher stages of development of 12-stage view, some of these things that we used to think were nonsensical or fanciful, fairy tales, stuff to just inspire us when we're younger in the path, they start becoming pragmatic, becoming practical and real. Like someone pushing their finger into rock, pushing their finger straight into rock, and you're like, wow, look at that. And you take the rock home, right? Is that real? You're holding the rock. Okay. What stage does a being have to be able to do that? High, very high, like 10. Okay. So a lot of times the texts are inspirational or hyperbolic. But sometimes, and you have to know the difference, they're telling you, no, this is really the result of this practice. You will be able to fly. Like there was one guy that was popular on the circuit for a while, the spiritual tantra circuit for a while, Indian guy. He was going around giving very classical tantric teachings from Kerala and saying that his teachers were these tantric witches who could fly. And they would fly everywhere. And when he was with them, he could fly. But then when he was without them, he didn't have the level of development where he could fly. And then other people I know from the West went to train with him and found that they were taking these herbs that were like kind of mushroom based or whatever, and they were getting high. And the flying experience was what they were feeling, but they weren't really flying anywhere because these people had dropped acid and taken mushrooms before. So they knew they weren't flying, but that these other Indians who were doing it thought they were flying, right? So that kind of thing can happen too. What's important is to know what's in your tradition, what's the fruit of the practices you're supposed to be getting. And there are some scars that wake up Mercury until it's a sentient being, but if you want to do that alchemy, that's your thing. Great. It's not our path, right? My teacher sent me down that path for a while and I did it for a while, but I eventually lost interest and said, I'm not interested in awakening Mercury. I want to awaken me. And I know that awakening the Mercury awakens me, but I want to do it meditationally. He was like, cool. Okay. Forget about the Mercury. So I understand you. I feel you there. What's going on here? I get it. So the early stages always do make sense because they're dealing more with your psychology, your emotions and so on. But then as you get to higher stages, it seems to not make as much sense for people a lot of times because at the higher stages, it starts to talk about things that you haven't experienced yet, right? Right. Okay. Look, how do you assess students to inform what guidance, sadhana, et cetera, to give them? How do you know where they are on the path, especially when in this day and age, you may not have much time with them to assess their conduct? Absolutely correct, which is why in 2015, I went back to completely traditional teaching. Here it comes again. What did I eat? Stuck in my throat. I went back to traditional teaching, which says I will only give foundation and preliminary practices to people that I don't have a daily contact with. And if people want to grow down the 5 ways, they have to come here for retreats. If they're following the 5 ways and they're coming for retreats and they've completed the retreat before, there's no damage in giving them the next retreat experience, right? Except when we get very high, like in level 4, level 5 of the 5 ways, you go through the stages of the 5 ways, up a higher stages. Then, of course, I'm not going to give anything unless I've seen the person and I know that they're very healthy in body and mind, and they're able to imbibe that higher level of practice, the lifestyle that it requires, all these kind of things for sure. So how do I assess? I can't assess from a long distance, if that's what you mean, and you're absolutely right about that, and it's wrong to do it. You can't assess unless you see them on a daily basis. Same way that an Ayurvedic person today going online and telling people what their constitution is, or tell them how to figure it out online is ridiculous. It's ridiculous and it's malpractice and it should be illegal because then people go out and think they're this constitution and they mess themselves up, the way they eat, the way they function, whatever. The Ayurvedic physician grew up in the village with the villagers, with generations of the same family. They could see family generation disease coming down as well as constitutional traits. They could be with the mother birthing the baby, watch the baby grow up into a child to a teen to adult, right? Then you know the person's constitution. You can't assess spiritually where a person's at just by them dropping you a line or getting on the internet for a few minutes. This is what people do all the time with me. I guess I have this reputation as like a fix-it person. Don't ask me how, because I don't offer this kind of advice anymore at all. But people still will write and say, oh, this is my background. They give you like a 1-paragraph background email and then say, what should I do now? I don't know. I have no idea. Should I do all these practices that I was given by these teachers? I don't know. Go talk to those teachers who gave them to you. They're not my practices. You're not my student, So now there are students who are living down here with us, who are coming more with us, who are going to do the same thing in Maine, at the main center, and I'll have regular contact with these students, and I'll be able to guide their sessions over many months, over many years, because it's easy for people to sustain a kind of gung-ho attitude or a kind of false fruit of the practice in their conduct for a while, for a few months or a few years max. But you're going to start to see the chinks in the armor. You're going to start to see the holes in the game. You're going to start to see how it's fallen apart. And then a teacher will advise the student to get those together with prescriptive practices, right? And then deeper teachings can be given. This is how it should be done. This is the only way I do it now. I don't do it by guiding people online, unless you lived with me for 10 years first, and I know you well enough to guide you online. That's a difference. So good question. In the foundation practice, the salutations go from Abhinavagupta. In foundations practice, the salutations go from Abhinavagupta to Anandamayi Ma. In the salutations practice, in the foundation practice, the salutations, were there really no known siddhas in our lineage between those two? I don't even know what she's referencing. Do you? Does anybody know? But it doesn't. It lists tons of people in between. I'm wondering what copy you have, because this is the second time you've told me about strange things in the copy of the lineage blessing prayer. I don't think you got a good copy of it, Lopa. There's a lot of people. So your question, were there really no known siddhas in our lineage between those two? Massive, and they're listed. And that's not even the full list. I mean, the full list would be thousands of siddhas between those two. This is just names I chose to give people, because these are names that we know that are in literature, but there's so many siddhas that go down through that list. And there's some people that people don't know that I named there as well. So yeah, there's a lot there, but why don't you check on that copy you have? In fact, I'd love if it's an electronic copy for you to send it to me, because I'm getting really curious now of what you're reading that's been altered. Or was this because these teachings necessarily went underground between their relative times on earth? If so, what do we know about the ones that passed on teachings between? Oh, we know a lot about what they've taught us in between that whole, we know a lot about what all our lineage masters have taught us, all the teachings. There's a video on the YouTube channel about Lineage. Do you know what it's called? The Lineage one, where we did it while we were in India, and I have a big whiteboard and I explain that. Okay. So Kali is going to try to look for it and put it up in the chat box for you, Lopa, and everybody else. If you have not seen this video, I'm going to ask you if you want to practice Trika mahasiddha yoga, or if you want to really understand how lineages work and what teachings come down, and how you can be in a lineage and be a teacher and not be fully realized, and how fully realized teachers in that lineage can come after you. You can teach someone who becomes fully realized, if you're not realized. Watch this video. It's really important. I gave it a lot of detail, a lot of time, used a board to explain it, because it needs that kind of fleshing out to really be understood. So your question again was, oh yeah. So yeah, we have all this teaching, all this knowledge that comes down. Oh yeah, that's what I was going to say. When you understand how lineages work, they expand, right? And the expansion makes great libraries. So the Taoist library was so big, expanded over so many thousands of years, that it dwarfed the Buddhist canon. And the Buddhist canon is pretty darn big already. Did they start that way? No. So teachers teach and teachers write, and they add things that are thought to be authoritative because they are based on what went before, but they're a further exploration of it, an explanation of it as well. And this goes down as a new text, and texts grow and texts grow. But what you'll see pragmatically is you can learn all those texts, but it would hardly be a way to, that's it. It would hardly be a way for you to grow. It would be very academic at that point. And maybe you couldn't learn all the texts. It's thousands of texts. It's kind of hard to learn. So you know about them, or you see references to them. What you'll see is that lineages will go like this, coming down from the source. They'll go like this, expand, and they have to edit. And the teachings and practices will get it edited out down to a streamline again, then it expands again over time, then it has to go through editing. So it goes like this process over time. And I'm in a process right now of editing. I've received a tremendous amount of teachings from many different lineages that are mahasiddha lineages. And what I'm doing is saying, this is Trika mahasiddha yoga. We only have a body, a speech, and a mind. Trika, the three. Body, speech, and mind. Dharmakaya, Sambhogakaya, and Nirmanakaya, the threes that are important to us, are body, speech, mind, Dharmakaya, Sambhogakaya, and Nirmanakaya. Using these three understandings of the three bodies and the 3 gateways, 3 doorways, we practice those techniques and those views that give full rainbow body realization. That's a summation of Trika mahasiddha yoga. Donald Morris, if you're there, perk up your ears. That's what it is. So we have what we need, which is the crucial thing. Now, I've learned more than I'll ever teach. We only need a certain amount, and we only have a certain amount of time in this lifetime to practice it. So that's the way we're handing it down, okay? Watch that video. Very important to understand. All right. And send me that foundation practice you have that has these huge gaps in it. It's very interesting. Okay. Oh, Donald, here we go. And these are a lot of questions from Donald. I'm going to kind of go quickly through these, Donald, okay? In the lineage diagram on Facebook, there are 3 main groups. Satchitananda, Shivananda, is that the one that I drew by hand, the one on Facebook? Is the lineage diagram the one I drew? So we have to check, first of all, if it's the one I drew by hand or not. There are 3 main groups, Satchitananda and Shivananda. That sounds true. 33rd memory treason. The Bun, Dzogchen, I learned from 33rd memory treason and the people he sent me to. And C is others, I guess so. Which of these is the main source of what you call oral tradition? Okay, great question. None of these are the main source of what we call oral tradition. In fact, it's very important to understand that your question is wrong. It means I can't give an answer because the answer would necessarily be wrong because the question is wrong, as my guru used to say. Oral tradition goes with every single, or oral teachings, which become tradition over time and are passed down, go with every single spiritual tradition from the Dharma. Every single one that came out of India, Nepal, Tibet, China, Zhangzhung, Kashmir, Japan, Korea, whatever, all the Dharma countries, Southeast Asia, they all have, is it the same? They all have oral teachings that are passed down. This is the oral tradition. So I coined the term OPT, oral practice tradition, and that's now becoming a popular term. I'm happy to see that happen because it's important to understand that traditions are kept intact by text and by oral teachings and by the lived experience that's handed down teacher to teacher to teacher to teacher, like that. There are these 3 transmissions that occur. Of course, new transmissions come as new arrivals into our consciousness, and teachers will say, I have a new text, so I just got revealed a new text. Okay, call it a 4th way of doing it, but it becomes a text and then becomes oral as well. So it really still comes back to text tradition, oral tradition, and the lived experience from the teachers that comes down the line. Now, the transmission quality. So every single tradition has oral teachings, right? Let's get that understood right away. But some traditions lay stronger on oral than they do on the text. The text is like a reference point, and it's important, really important. And the living experience of it is very important. But the oral tradition, it really eclipses everything if it's intact. That's why texts are great, because when oral tradition gets lost, you can go back and reference the text. But you have to have training in the text because texts will contradict each other. Texts will give different views within the same tradition, I mean. The oral is what sorts that out. The oral is what makes it understandable. The oral is what makes it pragmatic, so you can use it. And the oral, in the end, is the most important because you can't always carry around a computer, look up a text or a textbook. When the diaspora occurred from Kashmir, when the Muslims came in and just started raising all the temples and killing the yogis, and they ran up into the mountains and crossed over into Tibet and all kinds of things. There is where, in that trans-Himalayan area, is where so much oral tradition was preserved. Now, all of the teachings I received that are oral tradition pretty much come from that area of those yogins who were from various traditions. Then, during peaceful times or whatever, however, these oral teachings that would accompany the textual teachings, the systematic textual teachings, would filter back in, would pervade and come back in again. Okay? So we're not saying we have something unique with oral tradition, except that our oral tradition is very strong. In that sense, it is very unique. There are, within the oral side, we have view teachings, cosmology, and so on. We have instructions on practice. We have pointing out instructions. And we have the introduction into your nature. All this is oral. Can't get it through books. You're not going to waken up to your true nature through a book. If you do, you like seriously have a high aptitude. And there's one of those people per every 200 years, maybe 300 years. A Pratyeka Buddha, they call him. And then they still have to go further. So we have a very extant, very practical oral tradition. I focused on that a lot. I took copious notes. I was like Carlos Castaneda. I would go with a teacher and they would give the teachings and I would just take all the notes because the text is there already. And the explication of the text, I would also take those notes. But the oral that was running parallel to it, the pointing out instructions, the introducing to your nature instructions, etc., I really got that down because I knew that this was the most important. This is what survives when the books are burned, when you have to run away and you can't bring your computer or your books with you. So that's the importance of the oral tradition, okay? Which mahasiddhas are most correlated with Trika Mahasiddha Yoga and why? Number one, all the mahasiddhas that went to the Rainbow Light Body are the most correlated with Trika Mahasiddha Yoga. And number two, then there are some we lean on more than others because our teachings line up with them more than others because they were in the sect of their tradition that we used more or was passed down more or that I received more of. So if you look at something broad strokes, Kashmir Shaivism, non-dual Shaiva Tantra, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16 sects you can see within that are all non-dual, all give high-level realization. And we received transmissions, I'd say, from about 8 of them. But what do we focus on? Like 3. And what's the core of it? The core of it is really a krama kind of experience, the krama sampradaya, but without the text, without all the technical terminology, the oral side of it, right? I didn't receive the krama text. I didn't receive any of that stuff. And the kaula, obviously kaula, because Machandanatha is the head of our whole, he's our root guru. He's the one we visualize in the light body and see our guru take the form of Machandanatha, right? So we don't get focused on the personality of the guru. We always take the root guru as the visual, but understand that when my guru shows up in personal form, the flow of transmission, the inspiration from the beginning comes through them. That's what I revere, not what they eat, what they watch on TV, what their opinions are. If they pick their nose at red lights, couldn't care less, So we focus on specific ones and know why, because they come from certain lineages that we practiced more with, right? So having said that, Virupaksha is quite a big luminary for us, and he was claimed by the Shaivist and by the Buddhists, Tibetan Buddhists, so he's an interesting one. Machanda, of course, said to be first of all the 84 mahasiddhas. Were there mahasiddhas before Machanda? Of course. Machanda just was the lucky one that, got this spot of being the one who was the first, because he was the first modern era person who organized it all about 3,500 years ago. Some people say it was about 1,500 years ago. Some say 3,500. 1,500 doesn't make a lot of sense, though. So I think it was very early to me. But it doesn't matter. He's the one we use. That's where the lineage power flows from. That's what we focus on, to focus on his Sambhogakaya, so that Sambhogakaya energy gives us the grace and compassion of receiving the Shaktipata so we continue to grow every day, right? So Machanda, of course, because of his preeminent position in our lineage as the root guru, Virupaksha as a very powerful one who filled in from the sides a lot, Drampanamka, Padmasambhava, Vairochana, Saraha. There's a lot. There's so many. But, there's a certain gang that we tend to focus on, right, for us. So I named some of those great ones. And of course, the ones like Jnananetra, Kalata, Vasugupta from the Shaivist side, they transmitted as well. Very important. The term Trika Mahasiddha Yoga does not exist. Oh, wait, where am I? Is Trika Mahasiddha Yoga a contemporary and neo term? Forget neo. It's a term that we created. Neo being new, yes. It's coined by us to describe this tradition, derived from multiple sources, of course. But only one Mahasiddha Yoga 12-stage view ties it all together. That's what makes it one source, really, even though multiple expressions of the one source. The term Trika Mahasiddha Yoga does not exist on Google search, except linked to you, as it should be. Is this correct? That is the new term, yes. Did they use this term? No, but they used the term. So Shivananda and Minri Treason, did they use the term Trika Mahasiddha Yoga? I don't know if Shivananda did. I never met Shivananda. I never saw it in his writing. He certainly talked about mahasiddhas and tantra, memory trees, and of course talked about mahasiddhas, though using the Tibetan term for them, right? Rigzin. Okay. Number 4, I read on a reliable Wikipedia that Saraha is at the origin of Vajrayana and Padmasambhava at the origin of Tantric Buddhism in Tibet. Does that correlate with your understanding? I don't know what you read, so I'm going to tell you. Saraha is a mahasiddha of Vajrayana. He was an arrow maker, probably a meat eater because of that. When you say he is at the origin of Vajrayana, it doesn't mean anything. Sorry, when you say that. It doesn't. Was he the originator of Vajrayana, of Tantric Buddhism? No, he was not. 2 people in Kashmir developed it in 650 CE, roughly 650 CE, and it took off from there, okay? So he was not the developer of Vajrayana. At the origin, if you mean, was he really deeply attained? Did he have a great attainment? Yes, if you mean origin like that. Is Padmasambhava at the origin of Tantric Buddhism in Tibet? He was invited by a Tibetan king to go into Tibet and establish Tantric Buddhism, Vajrayana, as the new religion of Tibet. Okay, number 5. Where does Vijnana Bhairava Tantra come in chronology? What kind of chronology? Of all the text out there? I've heard it is 5,000 years old. I don't think so. Where does it fit in this map? Which school wrote it? It seems to be that the Vijnana Bhairava Tantra, most people agree now, was written by Keoravati, one of the great female masters of the tradition, who is known as the goddess Ka. So they would say Ka, you know, and you have to understand what Ka means. It doesn't mean it's the first letter of her name, and they were shortening it. Like people call me D for Dharma as a cute way, I guess, of saying my name, which, you know, maybe cute, maybe not. But Ka means in Sanskrit, when we talk about Shaivism, Ka is the sense of, can you make a consonant sound Ka without following it with a vowel? If you can, that feeling that arises at the moment of that making it, because it's impossible to do physically, right? You know, that inspiration moment, that's your essence nature. That's how fresh it is and how quickly it's distorted and lost. That's your true nature. So when they said goddess K, they didn't say K. They weren't saying goddess K. They were saying Ka, right? And they were saying, you know, she's really in the state like all the time. She's freaking amazing. I don't know what line she was in specifically, probably Krama. I would guess Krama, because the techniques of her text very much align with the Krama view. And Satyananda's line of Tantrikas that he studied with, he received the Krama lineage teachings, and he received this Vijnana Bhairava, and he was very big on it and taught it to us. And so I feel like I have a lot of the good feeling of the transmission. I have a good feeling for the transmission of the Vijnana Bhairava Tantra, and it has quite a Krama feel to it, you know. And a lot of it is just about triggering that state of, you know, that awakened surprise state, right? You need a lot of other training to be able to make use of that text. And that's why I think it's a mistake to practice it in the way that it's being taught by modern scholars now, step by step, practice by practice. You go through it and people get stuff out of it. Oh, I had this great experience, that great experience. Dharma's wrong. Dharma Bodhi's wrong. I got this great experience from it. You're not supposed to get a great experience from it. You're supposed to become realized. You're supposed to realize your true nature and become enlightened. Enlightenment's not an experience. It's not a concept, right? It's not built progressively one on top of the other. So I think it's important that you receive that kind of text in the right context. Otherwise, you accept a minimal fruit for what really it can give you. Okay. I don't know what school wrote it. Number 6, on the Bumpo side, are you talking about the old bun, which I think is correlated with Taoism? It's not correlated with Taoism. Old bun's just old bun by itself. It mixed a bit with Vajrayana in the old days. They shared back and forth the Nyingma and the old bun, but it doesn't really have much to do with Taoism, except they knew of each other, okay? Or new bun. When I'm talking about bun, am I talking about old bun or new bun? I'm talking about both, actually. I'm talking about the old bun and I'm talking about new bun, both. I am open to learning from both bun, and I've received transmissions from both. And the fact is, what's called old bun actually has new bun in it. It doesn't take Padmasambhava or Vairochana, which are bigger in new bun, but there are certain texts that made it into old bun that do come from new bun. That's been proven by academics. So I don't think it's that important to make a distinction between the old and new bun. I tried to make that distinction to my teacher, H.H. Menri Treason, who was the worldwide head of the old bun. He said, oh, Nubun has some great stuff. He said, the guy you like so much, Shardza, one of the great masters I love from this tradition, Shardza loved New Bun. He loved Old Bun. He loved New Bun. And the fact is, many of the very new, powerful transmissions of Dharma, new transmissions that are coming of practices and texts are coming through the New Bun. So New Bun is very alive, very invigorated. But having said that, now we're seeing a reinvigoration of the Old Bun as well. With my teacher, I think he really brought it out, and Lopan Tenzin Namdak really brought out the power of the Old Bun again, and I think it's having a revival. I see it all over the internet. It's fantastic. So Old and New Bun are really great. There shouldn't have any fight between them, but they don't come from Taoism, like you said. The New Bun is definitely mixed with Vajrayana on purpose. So it took Old Bun and mixed it with Vajrayana and came up with New Bun, and that's why I think it's a hybrid that's better than both, to be honest, in a certain sense, although you can't ever be better than the foundation you came from, which is Bun. In a way, I could say, I shouldn't say better than, I could say very efficient, feels very warm, very fresh, like bread out of the oven. Can be really warm and still smell fantastic, or it can be a bit old. You're still going to get the same carbs and minerals and vitamins out of it when it's old, but when it's fresh out of the oven, it's so much better tasting. It's kind of like that with the New Bun in a way. Added question, why are we called Trika mahasiddha yoga? We did it, okay. And yes, we are in direct line of mahasiddhas. That's quite clear, right? Everybody who says, well, you can't name every single person in between yourself and Virupaksha. Yeah, no, I can't. They weren't written down, and I don't have it memorized. It was only emphasized that you can remember your three teachers, your teacher, their teacher, and their teacher. That was only emphasized in our tradition ever. So in the Shaiva side of it. In the Tibetan side, there's a lot better records because they never got invaded by the Muslims. Their records are intact, and you can see who taught who. But to think that those lines come down straight is wrong. They're sideways, they're staggered. Influences came in from everywhere. Again, watch my video on Lineage. Okay, Suki, you posted that, right? All right.
You said you were going to do another video soon on history.
Yeah, I want to do another video pretty soon on history, because this is where people are getting so confused because there's so many traditions that are available now. It becomes very confusing. So I want to do that. I think it's going to help a lot. Probably in a week or 2 or 3. Andrew, would you elaborate on the line within section 7, Guru Yoga, the lineage blessing prayer? May I understand the earthly masters to be the compassionate and beneficial radiance of the power of awakened mind. Okay, who are the earthly masters? Okay, the earthly masters are the masters that we think of as being very high, stage 9, stage 10, but all the way down to 7, because the earthly masters are the ones who are still in a physical body. However we perceive it, that doesn't matter. They're in a physical body, and they're still benefiting us. They're still here giving us the teachings, and that's who we're talking about, the earthly masters, not the ones who are just alive at this time, the ones who died in a body, who didn't rainbow light body. These are still the earthly masters, okay? So may I understand the earthly masters to be the compassionate and beneficial radiance of the power of awakened mind? In other words, can I help me understand when I'm praying in this prayer, help me understand my teacher in physical flesh. Like I'm training with a new teacher now who's helping me finish the training. I started with my 33rd memory treason in Dzogchen, going very deep into it. And I have to see that teacher each time as Sambhogakaya. I see that teacher in my mind's eye as Shenla Otkar, the god of the Sambhogakaya level, representative icon, or as Tapihritsa, the human being who is also interchanged often for the Sambhogakaya level. And that prayer is urging us to see that, because if we don't see that, we don't receive the transmission. We don't. And that's the important part, is to receive the transmission for yourself, right? Pragmatic side of it. Who are the earthly masters, right? What is the power of awakened mind? The power of awakened mind is the mind that is awakened to its own essence. Pure awareness with no object is who you are. And when that pure awareness without object reflects back on itself and knows itself, not as a thought, not as a discursive thought, but knows itself directly without thought, a knowing without thought, as that awareness. This is the power of awakened mind. How would you describe compassionate and beneficial radiance? Okay, because we want to see the masters to be like the sun, sending out that compassion, like a radiance, wisdom and compassion just pouring out, because that's what they are. For us, we're suffering until we meet those great beings. And then they have the love and the compassion to take us in as students. And then we do everything like babies do. We vomit on them, the vomit on the mama. Mama just cleans up the vomit, changes shirt. It's okay, baby. Doesn't smash it on the ground, Oh, it's okay, baby. We do this with our teachers. We treat them poorly sometimes. We treat them with familiarity. We treat them with indifference, and then we have to remember, oh my gosh, what am I doing? Just because I'm around this teacher every day, I shouldn't forget. They're my icon of Sambhogakaya. Oh my gosh, what am I thinking? And then boom, the whole world of spirituality opens up again. As soon as you change your inner disposition like that and relate correctly with Guru Yoga, it all opens up again. And you're back in the flow of transmission, and you're growing in wisdom and growing in compassion. And then you also feel this deep love and reverence and devotion because of that. See? So this is that awakened mind and how it's compassion and beneficial radiance. Michelle, I'm interested in the 10 movements of Kundalini. Please explain briefly or in detail. It'd be great. Yeah, sorry, Michelle. That's going to come out in the book. The reason is not that I don't want to, but if I gave all the movements of Kundalini in a lecture on video, it would be misused within 2 hours, made into a book by somebody else who has more time than I do to make it into a book. And the teaching would be skewed and obscured, and the real value of it would be lost. So I'm keeping this teaching for the Kundalini Hatha yoga training programs where people come for extended retreats, right? I'm not keeping this teaching, giving this teaching out online. It will come in a book form at some point, but then it's clearly elucidated and people can't mess it up. They can take it and give what their opinion of it is, but they can't change the teaching. It'll always stand there as a reference point. When I go to teach, like in Maine in August this year, for Hatha Yoga, and we're doing a retreat together, instead of like running people through one of the levels, I'm going up there to do a yoga retreat with the students, to do it together as a group. I haven't done a retreat like this for a long time where we're all practicing together. And it's not based on you learning the system. It's based on practicing and going deep. And the practices will be whatever comes to me in that moment that we feel like using, When what was it about? Oh, huh? Oh, the 10 movements. Thanks. The 10 movements. Yeah. There I'm going to give outer teachings on the 10 movements because it's only a 2-week training. You can't give deep. It's impossible. So I'm going to give the outer teachings, some outer teachings on it just to give a better feel for it. But when people are here for the retreat here, I'm going to give the inner and a little bit of the secret on it while they're here for this retreat coming up in October. That's going to happen. It's going to be a 1 year retreat, Kundalini Hatha Yoga, 3 levels in that 1 year. So I'm sorry to disappoint. I would love to, but I don't want to see it misused. Already my 12-stage view that I've taught that comes from our lineage, not really mine, I gave it out at teachings, and then unauthorized people who think they're smart when they're really just a smart ASS go out and start teaching it on their own in workshops. Never been authorized, never had deeper teachings on it, and change it. So poor people that go to those trainings and receive a skewed teaching because that teacher has too much of a big ego to learn it from the proper source and be authorized. So we don't want that to happen with the Kundalini stages as well. It'll happen in the future, but let it be not for now. So sorry about that. But in general, let's understand some of the overarching 3 phases of the Kundalini, right? Comes down first. Symbolically, these movements are happening. Energetically, in the channels, they're happening too. Comes down, which is called waking down or purification or anything you want to call it, where we become clearly self-reflective, where we really own our stuff and see our stuff and open deeply and preparing ourselves to receive this grace that's coming down. When that hits full, then we start a moving up process. It doesn't mean that the Kundalini is not still moving down. It's still moving down, but now the flow is also moving upward. So purification is still occurring while expansion and stabilization of awareness and awakening occurs as it goes up. Very much what we're going to do in Kundalini Hatha Yoga training. After it reaches the crown, it goes out of the crown and goes to the extra bodily chakras, still on the journey up. Accumulates and gathers the wisdoms, collective wisdoms and energies above, and then it comes back down. And it comes through the crown again and comes down through the body takes home in the heart, but continues to radiate down into the base. These are the three overall movements of Kundalini. Most of the literature, actually all the literature I've ever read on Kundalini after I came out of training in India in this topic, only described starting at the bottom and going up. And that's what's wrong with Neo-Tantra. That's why Neo-Tantra is not getting any results. That, and probably also because people just really want to have a good sex fest and not really grow spiritually. To be honest, there's nobody there in Neo-Tantra really trying to get enlightened, because if you were, you'd quickly figure out it's not working. You'd quickly figure out I'm getting a lot of joy and bliss and sex and orgasms and pleasure and making nice relationships with people. But that's not how we define enlightenment or self-realization or liberation. So you'd be moving on. So if you're happy with that, great, but that's not it. And this is why it's not working, because the scholars and the neo-tantrics, they don't really get it. They don't understand these movements, okay? So more on that when the book comes out. Sorry to disappoint you there. Bobby, Neo-Tantra Mythbusters, okay. What does that mean? Transfiguration equals, in Neo-Tantra, the practice of sitting across from a partner and eye-gazing for long periods of time. That's transfiguration, huh? Interesting. They took a Catholic term. Does that have any roots in our lineages? Oh, I see. Neo-Tantric Mythbusters. You're going to list out a bunch. We're going to bust them. Sorry, I get it. Okay. Does eye-to-eye transmission have any place, or eye-to-eye meditation have any place in our tradition? It does. In mirror consort yoga, eye-to-eye transmission is there. Meditation is there. Eye-to-eye transmission from a teacher to a student is also possible, right? But the way that they do it in Neo-Tantra, it's not going to do anything except produce trance states or mystical states or spiritual experiences. What are you saying, Dharma? What are you saying? Trance states, mystical states, spiritual experiences. That's spiritual development. No, it's not spiritual development. Actually, it's trance states, mystical states, spiritual experiences. That is not spiritual development, and that's the problem. Eye to eye is supposed to be a very, very high level of practice. You wouldn't get it in just one of these retreats. And these Neo-Tantra teachers don't have a clue about what it really means, about how to practice it in the higher stages of advanced Shaiva Tantra, Vajrayana Tantra, Bon Tantra, or Dzogchen. No idea. Mythbuster number 1, boom, that's gone. So there are roots, but it's like retarded how they use it. So no. Sleeping on your stomach is not good for your energy. Sleeping on your back is best. Is there any energetic indications for sleep postures? Okay. That's not so much a myth-busting thing. That's kind of real. First of all, the best posture for sleep is the one that's going to give you deep sleep. After that, once you've established how to sleep deeply, because your channels are now relaxed enough, now you can work on postures that will create sleep that will be better for the channels. Here we have difference in the tradition. My own guru has said sometimes lay on one side, you should only stay on that side. Other times he said lay on this side, lay on that side. You follow? Go back and forth during the night, But it's generally thought that when you lay on your back, you're going to be shutting down your channels a fair bit. And when you lay on your stomach, you shut them down even more. And people say, but we do yoga nidra from our back. Yeah, but you're not sleeping, right? You're conscious. So in general, laying on the right side is the recommended way to train yourself to sleep if you want to get the best benefit for the channels and also to decrease stress on the stomach and the heart. But there are systems that will teach you to do a certain amount of time on one side, then switch to another side. Those systems do exist. They are traditional, okay? But if you're not in those systems, just try to get a good sleeping posture where you can get good deep sleep. Number 3, Tantrika should always sleep alone, including pets, so as not to mix astral energy. Any truth? Okay. Yeah, when you sleep alone, it's better for dream yoga practice, not astral practice, not about auras mingling. It's better for your dream yoga practice. So no one's going to shake the bed. No one's going to roll over and hit you. No one's going to sigh or dream at night and talk out loud and going to disturb you, right? Pull the sheets off of you and wake you and kick you and so on and so on and so on. Also, there is something about this, that's the pure stillness aspect. That's really important to get good deep dream yoga practice and good sleep in general. But then there's the aspect of, do you want to sleep in someone else's aura? Well, there's a thing. if someone is not your dedicated partner, your marriage partner for life, and you're just sleeping around and you're sharing the bed, do you pick up stuff? You do a little bit, actually. You do. You'll pick up a little bit of stuff. And that's better if you don't do it. And sleeping with pets, that's kind of really out there. That's not something that we would consider to be very good to do at all. So let the pets have their little bed on the floor out in the living room and you be in your bedroom. Yeah. It's much, much, much better. Yoni puja, fact or fiction? If factual, how's it performed and why? Yoni puja, linga puja, you hear this all the time. So in tantric practice that uses sexualized practices, the whole body is divinized by doing nyasa on the body, placing mantra on a point, touching it or visually touching it with your mind. And then you proceed into the puja. Now, when there are sexual practices, even when there's not sexual practices done, the yoni or the linga are often touched or visually touched and a mantra is placed there because it's part of the whole body. And it's an important energy to include in practice, right? And Tantra, therefore, always is very holistic. So when the practice is focused on the sexual sadhana as the culmination of the practice, that ritual will have more emphasis on the awakening of the energies that the genitals represent and can channelize physically. Okay. And so therefore there's a lot more marma going on there, a lot more mantra going on there, a lot more consecration and so on. And I think the neo-tantric people have tried to copy this, right? So yeah, there's a precedent for it and there is a real way to do it. We're definitely not going to teach that in Yogi to Yogi, for sure. And the truth is I don't really teach it. I don't teach this. I've learned these things. I don't teach them. I don't think they're pragmatic. I don't think they're important anymore. I prefer to work with more of the yogic level of it, which means more of the inner and secret level, which is not the outer ritual level. Okay. And again, that's for students that have been around a long, long time, right? And they have to be in a good marriage with a partner who's also practicing so they can use it with their partner. So we instruct the partners on how to do it. It's not some kind of thing I would instruct somebody one-on-one outside of a good partnership or something, because how are they going to practice it? That was a serious question. I gave you a serious answer. For anyone at the end of their life who will not have the opportunity to attend a death and dying retreat, is there a book that you would recommend? And or could a one-on-one session with you be beneficial to aid them in attaining a more peaceful next life? I think it's probably important that we produce sooner or later a book from the death and dying retreats that gives people the way to prepare for death right and dying the right way, So we have to produce that. We're kind of understaffed right now. If I could sit down and give lectures every day to a group of people and put together the book, maybe when the group is developing down here now, people are moving here now, that might happen. I can't recommend any one book because I think the books about death and dying, there's many good ones. They'll tell you, help you, but a lot of them are cultural based. Like Tibetan Book of Living and Dying is very cultural based. And there's the American Book of Living and Dying, which was written in the 60s when someone said, we have to make an American version of this. And it's kind of rad. It's kind of really interesting with cartoon images and all that kind of stuff that you use to understand the death process, that would be more relevant to Americans. But anyway, there's no book that comes off the top of my head that I would recommend. Get to a dying retreat if they can't. Would a one-on-one session help? Well, one-on-one sessions, let's get out of the session online mode for a moment. Let's think about it. When a group of students are practicing together and one of the students is dying, the teacher will be with the student, definitely, at the most important junctures of the dying process and help them go through the process. Maybe they're dying for like 2 months. They're going to visit them regularly and work with their practice right through it. And then as they're in the last day or two of dying, they'll maybe be with them for hours at a time. At the moment of death, etc., they're going to try to help guide them through the after-death states mentally through their practice. Really great gurus and lamas can guide us through the after-death states, taking us through the practices we received before to help us from becoming stuck on our way through. And that's just the greatest boon, What's that book I always read from during?
Graceful exit.
Thank you. She's so good. Graceful Exits is a book we should all have to see all these masters that come from these great mahasiddha traditions, how they died and what happened and the circumstances. It's really beautiful. And there's great photos in it too. Graceful Exits. I highly recommend it. Okay. So yeah, the teacher would be with the student at the very end. So could a one-on-one session help? Sure. I mean, one of the greatest things you can do is meet with the Dharma teacher when you're dying. If you're open to it. I mean, that's why my ex-wife and I spent so much time with my mother when she was dying. Her resolution of her death to whatever we could get it to be better than it would be without us there will help me, would help my kids, so, and their kids and so on. You're just trying to help your family line. But for anybody who's dying, to have time with someone who can help them understand the dying process, give them some vital teachings, answer some vital questions to calm their spirit as they go through the process. Of course, it's very helpful. Elodie, how are we doing on time? An hour and a half? 2 hours, 2 hours and a half? Huh? Approaching our third hour. Yeah, well, that's good. That's good. We can break it up into parts if we want. You quoted the Buddha, whatever you're doing before, you're doing now. People don't actually change much, is what Elodie's saying. Not enough to be the cause of vastly different lives. That's what I believe. So does it mean that we are always doing the same mistake that keep us caught in samsara? Aha, light bulbs go on. Yes. This is represented in Chinese astrology as Chi Sha star, represented in Indian astrology as the star Rahu. Yeah? Yes. Is it one of the keys? It is one of the keys. Yeah. Why are we here again? That's the question. So, there used to be only three questions defined the pith mahasiddha practice in India. Who am I? Where did I come from? Where am I going? Those three questions. The who am I is have I realized my nature. The where did I come from really helps me realize my nature because it helps me understand. And how you find where you came from is what you're doing now. What karmas did I do before that I'm still doing now? Everything that I feel obsessive and compulsive now is what I did before. And I'm going to do it again after I die, unless I get through it in this lifetime. That's all you have to look to. And where am I going? Well, I'm going to a better situation than this because I'm going to get through it this lifetime is what you should be telling yourself, right? Okay, good. You're listening. I like it that you listen so well. Can you explain the relationship between the three bindus and the three kundalinis? The three kundalinis. Not sure what you mean by the three kundalinis. Maybe send in a description. Do you mean three movements? If you mean the three movements, then it doesn't have much relationship with the three bindus. But I will say this, because neo-tantrics have to hear this again and again and again, and new people too, to traditional tantric yoga, mahasiddha yoga, which is the same thing, have to really hear this again and again and again. You must start by developing Ajna chakra. And before that, you have to develop physical health, channel balance, prana balance, and then Ajna chakra before you try to work directly with your sexuality, especially in groups or with other people. When I see the people doing all this group sex, it's like, holy smokes. That's just crazy. There's no way you're going to focus during all that. That's just an experience. It's like a rave with your clothes off, I guess. So the core urging of the masters is before you awaken the red bindu's power of the first three chakras, before you get into your lust and anger in great depth, do the foundations first and develop some higher function of Ajna chakra like we do. That's why it's in the foundation practice. You see, this is a system. And why one of the first things we do in our energy practice in the foundation practice is we work on enhancing the function of the Ajna chakra and the two channels that are important for Ajna chakra. Because if that isn't functioning at a higher level, you're never going to be able to deal with the content of the treasury of worms. The deepest, darkest samskara, the compulsions that keep us taking rebirth over and over. You're never going to cut through them. Never, without this power. And if you start in the first three chakras like Neo Tantra does and finish there like it does, whether they want to or not, they're never going to get to bring it up because they're already caught in the delusions of pleasure and sex and not getting real teachings and not coming from real lineage where someone can explain to them what is the true nature of your mind. What is the true svasa rupa, shiva rupa, your essence, nature? They can't explain it to you and they can't transmit it to you because they don't have it. It's all just like mass marketing, and it's actually about economy. It's about making money, really. So, okay, get your agya going first, folks. What is the importance of decluttering the mental space? Is the first step a synchronization of mental constructs with the view, then keeping a wide openness of not knowing? Yeah, very well put. But the decluttering, the first step of synchronizing mental constructs with view should happen, but simultaneously we need to take down how much mind function we do. Like if you're a Wall Street trader, your mind is going so fast all day long. This is a very difficult mind to have exercising 8 or 10 hours a day and then get realized. Maybe impossible. You're in the university math laboratory and you do math all day long, physics, whatever, very difficult to get realized with this much mind. We need a lot less mind. You got to remember how little mind we used in this way when, even 100 years ago. They say, I've read these things where it says 100 years ago, people would read only one major city newspaper worth of information in their entire life. And that's if they knew how to read in their whole life. Well, we digest information so much more. We think so much more. Our jobs are about thinking. We've become a slave to mental constructs. So that is what really has to slow down. And you have to find yourself in a way, like I know you're getting your retreat center up now, Lodi, and you can have your little baby farm, I think, right? That's great. Get in the dirt, do the farming, relax more, see the sunshine, go to the beach, do the things you got to do. Get that mind chatter down. Don't keep pursuing jobs that, necessitate so much mind chatter. If you want to be a good meditator, if you want to go high, because they work antithetically to each other. Yeah, I think that covers it. Okay, Peter, I'm doing the Kundalini Hatha Yoga introduction practice, and my question is if you recommend any additional practice during daytime. For example, during breaks at work, at the bus, etc. You've mentioned double kumbha breathing and tribandha. Should I just stick to that? Yeah, if you're just doing that to prepare for going into the higher work, those are enough. And don't forget second attention. Always keeping your awareness on something like your right hand or your breath all day long. Developing that unbroken second attention of your breath or your hand or sensations, or your posture, especially in yoga training of your posture all day long and your breath. Very good second attention training. Try to develop that in unbroken fashion. That's really a great thing to do as well. Okay. And then get to the higher level trainings. Is it worth skimming back? Are there any questions or no? Nicholas. From practicing over the years, I've noticed a strong correlation with the fruit of the practice of centering, second attention, and the energy light body. Could you elaborate on how to and what causes the birth of the energy body? Also, how to properly nourish it. Yeah, that's a good observation, Nicholas, aka Anuloma, because they do form the foundation of the prana being settled in the channels and being seated. This is what asana really means, seating the prana. And then from there, we get higher development possible. Your question was how to and what causes the birth. Okay. So as that prana is seated and as we're developing a good lifestyle, eating well, sleeping well, keeping our energy and good conduct in the outer world and doing our practices regularly, we're accumulating energy. At some point, a refinement of the energy and an expansion of the energy occurs. With that refinement, with that expansion, which may happen in the same moment, we birth an energy body. We become much more able to function in an energy body and not just a physical body of senses in the world around us. Capacities may come rushing in with the birth of the energy body, or they may come on kind of slowly. But the how-to is the hard part. It requires a dedication, a daily practice dedication. And my own personal experience of it is like this. If you practice once a day, you're never going to birth that energy body unless you brought it with you from past lives into this life. So if you practice once a day, you're progressing like a snail on the Dharma trail. That's great. At least you're progressing, because the rest of the time of the day, you're being conditioned. But if you practice twice a day, now you're starting to slow that slide and you're starting to increase your progress. So 2 really good hardcore practice sessions a day, you're now speeding up, where you go from a snail to you're probably moving like a turtle. And a turtle in a race with a snail is going to be miles ahead, right? But you're not flying like a bird, like a falcon diving at 220 miles an hour. So if you go to 3 sessions a day, now you start to make progress in this lifetime. As a general rule, I'm giving this now, where you're going to get liberated in this life. If you've prioritized your life, if you've structured your life and made the sacrifices necessary to have 3 good sessions a day of practice, you're really starting to move that way. All things in consideration, that you're applying integration practice, that you're being really present all day long and integrating with all the levels of integration. Okay, great. Then everything I'm saying is true. When you go to 4 or 5 sessions a day, now you're going to get realized in this lifetime before death, if you're really, really sincere. The sincerity and devotion are the biggest things. You have to have dedication, commitment. You have to have aspiration, and you have to have devotion. Devotion, aspiration, commitment, or dedication. Without them, there's no chance. There's just no chance for realization. Then these numbers I'm giving you of practice sessions per day, spread out over the day, have relevancy. There is enough accumulated evidence in the oral practice tradition to say that these numbers pretty much correlate with what I'm giving you for fruit. If you are super sincere, if you have the aspiration, the devotion, and the commitment, okay? So the how-to, birth, yeah. So the energy will just accumulate by having these practice sessions and having a lifestyle that's under control and being healthy, et cetera, and working the integration. The integration is so crucial for birthing an energy body. It gets it to accumulate. And then at some point, it just unfolds. And it's there as a solid, stable experience, but it's like an infant that was just born. So you have to take care of it still and nourish it, but it's there and it's fully formed. It's got its arms, legs, head, but it's this big, right? Your infant. And then you have to make it grow and get strong. That's really important. Many people get the birth signs. Oh my God, I birthed an energy body. And then they just assume it's there for good and they stop doing their heavy practice. That's not the time to stop. That's the time to go even deeper and stronger. The reason I birthed an energy body when I was younger was that I was given second attention practices. It wasn't just that I started yoga at 7. It wasn't that I started martial arts at 12 with breathing and meditation and Kriya yoga, as well as the physical. It was because that teacher gave me second attention. And it was because I was self-reflecting a lot and thinking, well, I got to change these behaviors of mine, which are hard to do when you're young and a teenager. But I was already thinking this direction, already trying. I was trying hard. I was unsuccessful mainly, but trying very hard. But it was because he gave me second attention. It's because I was becoming aware of my energy practice, told me to keep my tongue in the roof of the mouth, told me to keep breathing into my lower belly, as a second attention, and how to walk and all this kind of stuff. Because all these things I was learning as second attention kept me aware and awake during the day, I wasn't getting lost out in emotions so heavily. I wasn't getting lost in lust so much and anger so much and fear so much and, all these experiences, or just getting lost in daydreaming and whatever, dramas. I had clarity. And I owe it to my teachers. They're wonderful teachers. And I had that as a teenager. That allows the accumulation of the energy that explodes into an energy body. Okay. Just remember, when it explodes, you start showing the signs of it, whether they're huge signs or little signs. Don't stop. Don't stop. Hello, Donald. Trismegistus. We got Hermes Trismegistus on the line, a reincarnated great Western alchemist. Should one work on mastering concentration before doing any kind of energy work? Oh, it's a tough call. You really can't do without concentration, right? Because the mind moves, the energy moves. So let's say yes. Let's be real traditional and say yes. So I just ran a solo meditation retreat for a student for roughly 10 days or so. Probably had about 8 sessions out of those 10 days, I think, together. And I taught him a lot about concentration. And that is kind of really crucial. So let's say yes. It is really important so the mind doesn't move to then cultivate anything else that you want to cultivate. So let's say yes. I would agree. And I would say, let's add to that purification too, because if we don't have purification, and concentration and purification are kind of like two sides of the same coin. But if we don't have self-reflective purification, then cultivating energy practice can take us down the path of delusion. Next one down is, again, Trismegistus. Hey, Ben in Thailand. How you doing, buddy? Thank you for your reply. Okay, Mr. Natural, anytime. Simplicity is when one cuts all. I did? Where?
Yeah, go up. Should one work on mastering?
No, I did that.
Oh, sorry. Okay, yeah. I'm wondering if I have that prana sickness.
Wow, we got people from all over the world today. So lovely. Thank you, Dharma, for your reply. I had the same confusion about interpretation. Trika, okay, good. I'm just going to make sure we got all these. Simplicity is when one cuts all the walls of illusion and sees what is. Yep, definitely. That's one part of simplicity. Oh, Trismegistus, here we are. I'm wondering if I have that prana sickness because I feel very disconnected from most people.
And it's the second part. Yes, later. That's how to work with prana disease if you have it.
Okay, we covered that a lot. Yeah. So we covered how to work with it. The prana disease, yeah, if you're feeling really cut off from a lot of people, sometimes it's a natural part of stage 7. Feeling cut off at stage 7 can hit, but it shouldn't last for a long time. It just should be like, whoa, I feel like, and if you're really in 7, you'll feel like you're connected on one deeper level, but cut off from the day to day. If it's happening a lot, it can be prana disease. And then you want to ground yourself out. So you want to get, well, basically you want to get working out. You want to get socializing. You want to go to the beach. You want to do a little bit more hanging out with some friends, even if it is discussing high spiritual things. You just want to connect a lot more. And you want to look at any practices that could be destabilizing your prana or making it rise too much. And actually, let me put a shout out to very experienced acupuncturists to help people with this problem too. Very experienced acupuncturists can get your prana to sit down in the channels and the mind channels. It's very good. There's really great points for that. Like in the middle of your third eye, in the middle of your heart, and so on and so on. These are just fantastic acupuncture points on the top of the head. But you have to have someone who's experienced. Obviously, don't try this at home with needles. But if you can find someone, that'll help a lot with prana disease. But then also look at the practices or even the view, because with their incorrect view, we can get prana disease. Yeah, if we have the wrong view, that's why I'm so big on view. You have to understand Donald and everybody else who's like, I don't want to do intellectual. I just want to feel the energy, man. I'm with you. I get it. Look at me. I get it. But if you don't have the right view, the energy will go out of control and mess you up. For sure. Are you okay? Okay. Oksana, where are we? Nicholas. Bring the preliminaries website back. What's he talking about? Got it? Okay. Victor, where's Victor? Catch mice in a bucket? Yeah, cool. Catch mice in a bucket. I love it. Needs a ramp. There's a lot of these mice catching things, by the way, Vajrabodha, online. I saw some really cute ones. You make little contraptions and they run up this and they get caught and they get caught and they stay inside and you take them out to the countryside or something. Victor. Hello, Dharma. Hello, Victor. Since you were working on people as a chiropractor, I am curious what practices you recommend for personal cleansing from the client's energies. Get paid a lot. Thanks a lot. Greetings from Czech. Okay, that was a joke. I treated lots of people for free for so long. Yeah, I'm so tired of people telling me I charge too much for sessions or for Trika psychology or retreats. I don't want to hear it anymore. I've given away so much free sessions to people in my lifetime. I have to pay for my kids' school. You understand? That's the way that works. Now, so Victor, what do I recommend for clearing and cleansing when you're doing work with clients? Because you guys are doing a lot of shiatsu body work. I think it is good to do as a regular hygiene. And I used to do many different practices actually in between, depending how much time I had. One thing I did was called bone marrow cleansing. So if you can learn a very simple set called bone marrow cleansing from Taoist practitioners, I love that one. And basically what you're doing is you're breathing in and you're breathing in the cosmic chi, right? As white light pouring down through the crown, coming into the crown, building like a cloud above the head. You're building it like a cloud above the head. The hands are going up like this, and then they're above your head. Can you see them here? Where your fingertips come together. And then you softly exhale. You softly exhale. Your eyes are closed or lightly open, whichever is better for you. And you're bringing, when your hands come down, they're mimicking the cloud going through you, right through your energy body, bringing the beautiful white cloud of soft chi down, heavenly chi down through you, taking out all the black soot. So the black soot is going, see it from your bones, leaving your bones. So the skull bones, then the cervical bones, then the clavicles and the scapulas, top of the humeruses, down the humeruses, and down your own hands as it starts completing it through your own hands and your forearm, down through the humeruses, down through the sternum, the ribs, the spine, all the way down. You're standing, right? You do this standing. And then you visualize it going down through the lumbars, through the pelvis, down through the thigh bones. And as your hands turn, I'm turning my hands here, getting them to go down to my sides and be at my sides at this point. You see them going, you see the energy continue to, the white energy goes down through the bone marrow, cleansing out the black soot, all the way down through the leg bones, fibula, tibia, ankle bones, all the way down through the toes and out, right down into the earth and draining out from your fingers as well, fingertips. All the black soot goes out. Right after you finish that, you see it go into the earth and become like compost. Then you inhale again. And you go down again. You do 3 times. This I found really, really good. The other one is spitting poisons. If you know that one, I got that from Taoism too. I would do in between. You're basically standing up doing the same kind of gathering of the energy, but then you're bringing it up through your mouth and you're spitting out, and you shoot forward with your breath as your hands come out like this, and you go into a squat. Then you come up again as you go down to a squat. You throw your arms behind you. You're throwing it out. These are just common practices. They share a lot in common. You can kind of make up your own based on it that are very powerful for that. Very easy to use too. There's ones in Prana Vidya that are a little more technical. You can use those. There's also your bija mantra you get from your teacher with light generated from the heart that takes it all out, or seeing your Sambhogakaya icon in your system, Shambhunata, Machandanata, Padmasambhava, Tapihritsa, Shenla Odkar, whatever, Vajrasattva, and you see that white light coming to you and coming down through you and out. That's another way to do it. Depends how much time you have and what you know for your tradition and so on. But when it goes in a little deeper, let's say you sympathize and empathize too much with this person and you take on a little bit and it's in too deep, then I like to go to the emotional clearing energy practices of tantric yoga meditations for healing, or Taoist 5 elemental, 5 emotional practice for healing. That's a little more complex, but still can be done quite rapidly once you understand it, you know? So think about that. Maybe I'll teach that 5 element, 5 organ healing meditation one day soon and pop it up on YouTube if everyone reminds me. Hopefully that helps. Your impersonations are, thanks. I got another career as a stand-up comedian, maybe if I fail. The Dalai Lama eats meat on his doctor's advice. They had to beg him to do so. That's correct. But then he got into it. So you can say they had to beg him to do it, but I personally know from a personal experience, he was at a banquet and he was served vegetarian food and he just moved around with his fork. And this is true now. He just moved around with a fork. Finally, people realized he was faking eating and they said, do you want something else? He looked over at the Prime Minister of New South Wales in Australia, who was sitting at the same banquet table, and said, I want what he has. We know this because our Vedic ritual master was holding a Vedic ritual, which he was attending. And he was at that same table. He goes, I'll have what he's having. He had a big steak. So they quickly rushed off and barbecued a big steak for Dalai Lama and brought it back. So don't get into this thing like, oh, he saved all the sheep and he had to twist his arm to eat meat. He's a great guy, but I think he likes meat. Nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with that. Hi, Dharma. Thanks for your teachings. I have 2 questions. You did? Okay. The main retreat. How about Kendra?
She's good. It's all the way down to
Meti. Fire and magic mushrooms. I don't know what that was about, but that's interesting. Oh, right. Fire and magic mushrooms. I love it. Where is Métis? Wow, I'm glad we're having so much action on this thing. You guys are really talking to each other and working it. I love it.
Do you have any other technology?
Oh, there it is. I found it. Sorry, it took me a while scrolling. Hi, Dharma. Do you have a yogic technology with those following issues? I guess to treat these issues. Trapped energy inside the brain after emotional trigger, trapped emotion in the diaphragm. Do we have a practice? Is that what you said?
Yogic technology.
A yoga practice, right? So many. Sometimes it's as simple as getting a foot massage, giving yourself a foot massage. Sometimes it's a grounding technique, like the ones I just gave actually are quite good for that, for taking it down. And in that case, you want to go down, 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 down and see it all go down and keep your mind down into earth for a while to drain back down this way. Also, laying on the ground is good. Yoga Nidra is really great because Yoga Nidra, if you follow Yoga Nidra and do even a generalized Yoga Nidra, not even one focusing on emotions, it'll recalibrate all those energies and you'll get up and go, wow, okay, they're not stuck up there anymore. So try those. Elizabeth, ooh, what is your view on desires? Oh my gosh, Elizabeth, can you ask a bigger question? What is the view on desires? In our tradition, there's a very clearly laid out view teaching, which is expansive with many different sections, called the doctrine of desire. And in a nutshell, it says that in this plane that we live in of form and desire, everything is desire. Everything is desire. When I look out in the jungle right now, I'm just seeing all the plants and animals growing all over each other. Everything is desiring something to eat, to procreate. It's all desire. Just a desire to come into being is part of our nature. There's a desire, but it's not a desire with an object out there. It's not me desiring chocolate, so I get it and I eat it. This doctrine of desire at its core is much different. It's a doctrine of spontaneous arising of something. That's also what we call desire. We say it comes from desire. It is desire. But the arising as it spontaneously arises, this goes all the way back to handling lust with Jorge's question in the beginning. This is a great tie-up. When lust arises, do you know that it's actually complete within its own energy already? Jorge and everybody else who are listening, did you know that? When anger arises, Louisa, did you know that anger is already clear already? Complete with its clarity and doesn't need to come out and hit an object. The lust doesn't need to grasp at the object and like eat it up. And the anger doesn't need to smack the object and let it know you're the boss, you know? Did you know that when all these energies of emotion arise, they arise as pure arisings of our essence nature as the energy, clear light energy. And that this energy is already complete, doesn't need completion, doesn't need to have an object. Did you know that? That's important. That's the basis of the doctrine of desire. Now, how do we get to experience that on a moment-to-moment basis so we don't have constant craving like that song Katie Lang used to have? You know, it's really great. And she wrote that from a place of craving for a lover she couldn't have. And that woman was already taken, you know. And because of that, she was constantly craving, you know, and you feel it in the song. And it went right to the top of the charts, her only top chart song ever. How do we learn how to be with that so it arises in the moment? We can feel completely fulfilled in the moment of arising. We have to work it back. And there are techniques. That's what I'm teaching. That's what I want you to learn. That was the emotional alchemy that we taught in the practice retreat online the other day. But it's more than that. It's even more. The doctrine of desire understood fully has a lot of nuance to it. And that's the key. When we are recognizing the completion, the self-perfected completion of the arising energy within us, as it's taught in Shaivism and Dzogchen and Taoism, and we're not projecting outside onto objects because there are no real objects outside that could complete us, even if there were objects. When we have that, we are in a phenomenal state of realization of our own nature. Very equanimous, very softly joyful, peaceful, wise, compassionate. It's all there already. So what we want to talk about desire is its origin. Its origin comes from your nature. It comes from your nature and is never separate from it and immediately resolves into its nature without needing an object. It's we who get involved in between, feeling it's my desire, the self-grasping, my deficiency. I have to react to it. I have to have my anger hit that object. I have to have my lust consume that object, that person or that situation or that energy or that product in the mall that I want to buy, whatever. It's all desire. But when we learn how to work with it artfully and skillfully, we learn how to bring it back to its source. Now, everybody listen to this, really important. Elizabeth, Klaus, everybody who's exploring desire, exploring red bindu work, everybody around the world I'm working with on this right now in private sessions, everything. Remember, when you go out exploring the desire first, without having the deeper level of the object desire, when you go exploring it with the object, trying to have the experience of enlightened object connection, before having what I just described, before having a sense of I'm in my own nature, understanding that I'm already complete with it, you're going to have a difficulty, if not impossibility, of actually experiencing, going into that energy of desire and feeling your wholeness. It's difficult. But if you have experiences of that deeper shunya, we would call it, deeper spaciousness, where desire arises without object and resolves without object, complete in its own nature. The more you develop that in the seated practice, the Agya chakra working, etc., the wisdom base, the more you are going to be definitely well prepared for when you go into desire and check it out, right? and go into desire and realize, okay, I can work with my own desires here and not be caught by them. In fact, it can be an energy of aspiration and trigger me to deeply cognize and awaken and remember my true nature and how all things are nothing but a mirage, temporary mirage within the spaciousness of essence, and that I don't need anything, that I'm complete, and therefore I'm a being of love and wisdom and so forth. All this can happen through that way. Okay, Elizabeth, that's in a nutshell, but like I said, if you get around for more specific practice teachings, retreats and things, we'll go very deep in that. Can a shaman achieve a light body, rainbow body? The technologies for achieving a light body, a rainbow body are very specific, very specific. You have to work with light in a very specific way. So most shamans on the planet do not have that level of technology at all. The only ones I know who did, where I've heard stories of a lot of light bodies, like lineage of light bodies, and I heard stories of the teachings, are in two. One is in the East Coast Cherokee, Tselagi people's teachings. They had great meditator yogins, and apparently they were able to light body. I don't know if it's still going on and kept secret. They're very secretive people. I don't even know if they have these teachings anymore. It's hard to say. And then I heard it in the Hawaiian tradition, not Polynesia in general, but Hawaii in specific, in their shamanism. Because, their shamanism and the Cherokee shamanism, I have a hard time calling it shamanism. They're really beyond shamanic, they're way beyond it. They took it into technology where it became real tantric yoga at the highest level. But it's not being taught in Hawaii. I know that for a fact now, because I've really been there, done that with the Hawaiian thing, trained my little butt off with everybody who was anybody, achieved all the lineage transmissions, and was certified as one of the guys of Hawaii as shamans go. And I knew all the people who were anybody at that time. So they've lost that idea. They don't know how to do it anymore. So no, in general, shamans don't have this ability anymore. Definitely not. They may be nice people, but they can't remove a body. Could you give us your own personal experience with these phenomena?
Based on Yogi's question about the alchemy practices, like mercury up the lingam to the crown.
We're running out of time right now. You want to bring it up again, how we could get to it one day again? Right now, I've had a lot of experiences, and it only helps. I really only like to share my personal experiences in the practice if it's related to a specific question. You're having a problem with your practice in this way. What did you experience when mercury came up to here? I got it stuck in my throat, or I got it stuck in my spine. How did you, So something like that as well. Mark, hi, Mark. I'm trying to understand how intense solitary spiritual practice benefits all beings from an outside beginner perspective. It seems that high teachers only provide direct benefit. Oh, no. Mark, solitary practice, even as a beginner or intermediate, always benefits all beings, because as you are developing, if you're practicing Dharma, okay? If you're practicing a Dharma tradition, any true Dharma tradition, you're constantly dedicating your practice and your spiritual development to benefit all. So you're shedding out these waves of blessing. They're called blessing waves in Bun. You're giving blessing waves, constantly generating blessing waves. This is definitely benefiting all beings. Like I alluded to when I first started my Shaiva training, the Shaivas believe that, like a Shangri-La kind of thing, that there is a council of yogins that are super high mahasiddha immortals who refuse to take rainbow body, but stay at stage 10, 11 in the high Himalayas, and they hang out in the same area and they just generate for the benefit of all beings, because they're trying to help the planet all the time. They've got a lot of work on their hands right now if they are there. And then Mark, to dedicated students, direct benefit to dedicated students. Can you articulate how solitary deep spiritual merit works down to the general? Yeah, like that. And honestly, it's just blessing waves. Every time you do a prayer, because every time you practice, you're dedicating it to your own benefit, but to the benefit of all beings. That's how it works. As you develop more spiritual muscles, then you're able to benefit more. And that's why, great beings, as you rightly say, can really benefit. But I want to say something about this. And this is really important to understand Guru Yoga. Please, everyone, pay attention. When we rely on great spiritual beings to give us their benefit, and when we do Guru Yoga, where we put the teacher's image instead of the root teacher, instead of Tapihritsa, Machandanata, Padmasambhava, whatever you use, Shenla Odkar, Shambhunata, when you put your own teacher's image there in the Guru Yoga and you're thinking that the teacher themselves are giving you the blessing power, you're not only doing Guru Yoga incorrectly, you're actually incorrectly approaching the Guru. Incorrectly understanding the blessing power. These blessing waves are coming from the Sambhogakaya nature of the teacher, which is not just limited to that physical body. And to use the image of the teacher in the Guru Yoga like that is to get culty, to follow culty ways of doing it, cult teaching and so on, right? So make sure that when we understand receiving the blessing power and giving the blessing power, that we're using the Sambhogakaya vehicle, right? Not our teacher's image. And let's make sure we're also not getting hooked on the blessing power of our teachers and thinking that it's a personal thing they're doing for you. It's very impersonal, okay? It's very impersonal, and they're not doing it per se. So it gets weird when people start to venerate a teacher as like a living God person who's giving them blessing power all the time. And they miss the point of finding their own Sambhogakaya, and that the teacher's supposed to be representing that. And that's the teacher's reflecting it to you. So it gets into the cult of adulation and adoration. And it doesn't go anywhere. It doesn't help the teacher. It doesn't help you. Okay. He's referencing Guru Yoga Lineage Blessing Prayer. Brian, Sri Bhinivagupta, great Lord of Tantra, who combined all the streams. What's Brian talking about there? Oh, they got that handled? Okay, they got that handled. It just jumped like crazy. Go right to the bottom? Ardarite. I hope I'm saying that right. I never saw that name before. So in this tradition, the view is that not all develop an energy body. Okay, that's absolutely correct. To say that all human beings are born with enlightenment, we're all born enlightened. That's wrong. We have potential enlightenment. To say that all beings are born with an energy body, that's partially correct. An energy body just enough to maintain our physical function. But it doesn't mean we have any of the higher attainment of higher energy bodies that need to be born, need to be generated, born, and stabilized. But the potential to have all those energy bodies, which all arise from Sambhogakaya, and to recognize our rainbow body nature is within all of us. But potential is the key word here. It must be actualized in this lifetime with real spiritual work, following real spiritual instructions, following a real path that has a view and the stages, and you can't wing it. You can't just willy-nilly it like, man, I'm just going to go with the flow, follow the energy, surf this and that, go try this workshop and that teacher. You'll end up with a lot of spiritual experiences, but no attainment. Really, no attainment as far as realization goes. Realization of your nature, being enlightened, and basically ending human incarnation for you and going into deeper realms, farther out realms of incarnation into your essence and so on, becoming a Buddha. So, there are energy bodies that you have to work to develop, and then you have to stabilize and enhance. And at some point, you don't have to do like struggling work. At some point, it will all be there just for you the way it is. Self-actualized, self-realized, self-sustaining, self-maintaining, but that's going to take a while. So everybody who hears the teaching that I'm already the Buddha within, I just have to reveal it, I'm revealing it. No, you have to do hard work to reveal it. Or I've got the energy body already with me. I've got the channels, right? Because I've got channels and chakras. I'm a human. The human body came out of those channels and chakras, which it does. So I must have an energy body. Yeah, you got the minimal amount to get here. If you want to accentuate, if you want to enhance, if you want to actually create new openings, new channels. Did I say new channel? Yes. New chakra. Did I say new chakra? Yes. You have to do other work. You have to do more advanced work. Just potential. We're all just raw potential. So it's a very good question. Excellent. Did we make it through them all? One more, maybe. Dharma, what is the link between Kriya Yoga, the Babaji lineage of Kriya Yoga, and traditional tantric yoga? Was Babaji a tantrika? Yeah. Babaji and his sister Mataji were tantric yogins. And this is why I think the academic scholars who say Tantra only developed in the past, 1,000 years, 2,000 years, I just don't think they're correct. There's a lot of evidence showing that Tantra got organized as religion and practiced by a lot more people around 200 to 600 Common Era. But I honestly think that it's been around for thousands and thousands of years, just kept very tight-lipped. Very few people, because I think very few people had the consciousness that I'm going to talk here, pure intelligence to even understand Tantra way back when, to be honest. So I think it was around for a long time because Babaji and Mataji, his sister, were said to be immortals already alive for like 5,000 years. And you'll hear this quite often. And if the beings themselves are telling you that, it's probably true. So yes, they were tantrikas. And they practiced a type of yoga practice which gave them relative immortality. And they're supposedly still around benefiting beings. I've never met one of them in person, but I've trained with teachers who were directly trained by Babaji. Like the Satyananda yoga system came to Shivananda directly from Krishna, who apparently started the Kriya yoga system that Babaji had. Krishna appeared to Swami Shivananda in Rishikesh in his ashram in his office. I think it was an afternoon. I'm not sure, but I think it was afternoon. Important. And gave him a new Kriya yoga system, 27 Kriyas. He said, this is enough. No longer need 118 Kriyas. And 112, whatever it is, and of the Babaji system. And Shivananda said, thanks, whatever. Shivananda was a far out practitioner. I mean, you do 10 years in a retreat on the Ganga in a little house. People always say, oh, he just knew stuff. Oh, no. That man was a force. He was a true spiritual force. He knew Tantra. But he knew that it was going to be tricky to teach it and people would really fall easily. So he just stayed away from it and taught a few of his students Tantra. And he taught it to Satyananda and he taught it to Satchitananda, who started integral yoga, and a few others. But only to Satyananda did he give the Kriya yoga that he learned from Krishna. And he gave it during a transmission, like a 5-minute transmission, boom, 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 when it's over. So there are other systems of Kriya yoga out there. Tibetans have kind of systems, not so much positioned like Indian Kriya yoga, but they have systems of Kriyas for sure. The Jains, the Sikhs have Kriya. Like I've studied it in many different traditions. And even within India, the generalized tantric yoga milieu of India, there are other Kriya Yoga systems, powerful one out in Maharashtra. So they're all over. So Kriya Yoga is a powerful system, and Babaji is a tantric yogi extraordinaire, and his sister is, may they bless us, help us in our path. And they gave a system that's very beautiful to the world to practice. It just may be, for some people, take too long to practice. It's a lot of steps to do in this practice. And there's a lot of politics and going to get the initiations into it now. In fact, it's kind of, I wouldn't say totally destroyed. You can't ever say that, but it's kind of really, it's so bad now. Like I looked into it in 1996, 97. It was so bad. And then I went to see someone in Varanasi in India who was a lineage holder as well. And there was no politics. And I thought, what's all this politics? So there's a lot of politics around it. It costs a lot of money. It takes forever to do it. You got to really suck up to the guru and everything, you know. So anyway, good luck if you're doing it. If you found a good teacher to give you the transmissions, that's great. Fantastic. Good for you outside the politics. I think that covers it, right?
Bobby Chop had a follow-up to her question.
Sure.
The question about having a session with you if they're approaching death or something to read. She says it's for a parent that's not a practitioner, but it's still useful to have a session.
If you know someone, a follow-up on Bobby Chop's death and dying question, if you know someone who is open, or who desires, not just open, but who really wants to hear a Dharma teaching about death and dying and understand what they're going through, then that is a very good thing. It's very auspicious. It's a blessing to receive that kind of a teaching and get it from the highest master you know, who knows death teachings and death practices at that time. That is good. Yeah. But it never should be kind of like you talk your friend or parent into it and they sit through it going like, when's this going to be over? That's not good. It won't help them. It's not useful. Okay. All right. Everybody, that was a long one. Enjoy. Until next time we see you. Sarva Mangalam. Love everybody. Have great wisdom. Give compassion. We got through.